Chapter 676. To date, Xiao Xian had only met one bat that could appear so quietly behind them. That was when he was digging for fire crystals. It was also a creature that no one in Yinjiao wanted to provoke. And now, the bat behind Xiao Xian and Ao was the bat leader that they had seen that year. Although it was not a king beast, it was half a king beast. Back then, it had traumatized the Yinjiao people so much that they had to change their hunting routes. Facing such an opponent, would it be easy to kill it? Obviously not. Ao did not know what to do either. He just stood there, motionless. The cut on the 1,000 grain gold was very smooth. The thing that had cut, it was very sharp and fast. They had thought that the robbers had used a sharp weapon to cut it, but now they knew that it was the bat leader. Who would have thought? The problem was, didn't the bat leader lead a group of bats on the mountain in the forest? Back then, the giant pit where they had found the fire crystals had been occupied by a group of bats. But after the bat leader appeared, it led the group of bats to a new territory. It was a whole mountain with a peak that reached into the clouds. That was a large territory, and it was not close to where they were. Even if the bat leader could fly fast, why would it fly to Yinjiao's farmland every day and harvest a grain every day? Could it be that it was interested in the 1,000 grain gold? Unripe 1,000 grain gold should not be attractive enough to attract it from the depths of the forest. Xiao Xian's mind raced as he tried to think of a way to deal with the current situation. Even if he was stronger than before, and Ao and the rest had improved due to the fusion of the fire seed, they would still be at a disadvantage if they fought this bat leader head-on. Under the moonlight, a terrifying creature was quietly hanging upside down on the 1,000 grain gold 2 steps away from them. It did not move at all. It just looked at Xiao Xian and Ao. Its gaze was more focused on Xiao Xian. Just as Xiao Xian was thinking about how to deal with it, the bat that was hanging upside down on the 1,000 grain gold moved its wings almost silently. It flashed by like a black shadow. It was not obvious in the night, and soon disappeared into the fields. That aura that made people nervous also disappeared without a trace. Caesar's fur was still standing. He opened his 3 eyes carefully and looked around. Phew! Xiao Xian let out a long sigh of relief. He would never have thought that it would be this guy. It left. Ao asked in a low voice. Yes, it's gone. When he heard Xiao Xian's answer, Ao sat down on the ground. He did not care if there was any organic fertilizer in the soil. Ao wiped the sweat off his forehead and looked at Xiao Xian. It should be it, right? That's it. As he spoke, Xiao Xian walked in the direction where he first sensed the strange atmosphere. There they found the 4,000 grain gold that had been cut. There was only one cut, and the cut was fresh. There was still green juice flowing out of the cut. Just looking at the cut, it was the same as the cuts on the other 3 trees that Ao pointed out to Xiao Xian. They confirmed that it was a thief, but they did not know how to deal with this thief that came to the 1,000 grain gold every day recently. If they fought, they would have to pay a high price. If they did not fight, the bat leader would come over every day. It was no longer in the depths of the forest. Xiao Xian had a feeling that it was not far from Yinjiao's headquarters. It had not returned to the Bat Mountain that it had occupied. Go ask the people in the hunting group if they noticed anything unusual when they were out hunting, said Xiao Xian. If there was no reason to attract the bat leader here, then it was very likely that something had happened at the Bat Mountain. Yes. Ao's face darkened. He was full of worries. If it was a thief, he was confident that he could fight. But he was not confident that he could defeat this opponent. When Xiao Xian and Ao walked out of the 1,000 grain gold field, the guards outside were confused. Head Elder, Elder Ao, are you leaving just like that? Ao's eyelids drooped. He looked like he had a lot on his mind. He did not respond to the guard's words. Xiao Xian did not want to say too much. If he said too much, it would cause panic. He only said, be careful. If you encounter a situation that you cannot fight, retreat first. Before the guards realized what Xiao Xian meant, Xiao Xian and Ao had already left. Since the bat leader had left with the 1,000 grain gold, it probably would not come back. Even if it found Xiao Xian and Ao, it did not do anything at that time. It would not come back to do anything after leaving. Just like a few days ago, it would be quiet and no one would know. Xiao Xian and Ao hurried back to the tribe in the middle of the night. They woke up the hunting team leaders who were already asleep. "What's going on?" Ma yawned. When he entered the house, he found Xiao Xian and Ao, as well as Gigu and Ta, all here. The other leaders were also here. Soon, other than Duo Kong, Zhong Luo, and the rest who stayed at the trading point, everyone above the level of a leader was called here. This was a place built on the mountain specifically for important discussions. They pulled down the animal skin curtains on the windows to block out the light and sound inside. The elders and chiefs looked very serious. This made the atmosphere in the room tense. If it was not something important or urgent, they would not be called here at this time. Those who were still sleepy were now fully awake. They felt uneasy as they carefully looked at Xiao Xian and Ao's expressions. They wondered what had happened. Why was the Grand Elder, who had been holed up at the flaming river trading point all this time, called here too? After the leaders who stayed at the headquarters had all arrived, they waited for the leader to speak. Ao looked at Xiao Xian and signaled for Xiao Xian to speak first. Xiao Xian took a deep breath and looked at the people in the room. With Xiao Xian's glance, everyone seemed to be even more nervous and uneasy. During the day, Ao told me that something happened in the 1,000 grain gold plantation. Someone harvested the grains. Xiao Xian briefly told everyone what had happened during the day. As expected, when it came to the 1,000 grain gold, everyone's eyes were burning with anger. They probably had the same thoughts as Ao. They wanted to catch the thief and beat him to death. However, after Xiao Xian's words, the fire in their eyes seemed to have been doused with a bucket of ice. Just like that, the fire in their eyes was extinguished. They shivered from the cold. Those who had followed them to look for fire crystals could still remember what had happened. Why is it that bat leader? Mike clenched his fists. He clenched them, then loosened them, then clenched them again. He was anxious and conflicted. Isn't it always in the forest? Chung, who was also a leader, did not understand and panicked. Chung and Mai, you should be able to see the mountain from your hunting route. Did you notice anything unusual there? Xiao Xian asked. Because of the Bat Mountain, the hunting group led by Chung had changed their route and avoided the mountain occupied by the bats. Every time, they could only see the peak of the mountain from afar, but they never got close to it. He did not want to get into trouble. He even told his brothers who had returned from the other side of the sea and warned them not to go near the mountain. I've never been there. I've only seen it from afar. I didn't see anything unusual. Chung scratched his beard. He was frustrated. If it were people from other tribes, he would not be afraid at all. However, that bat had left a bad impression on him. He still had a huge shadow in his heart. He could not help but shiver when he thought about it. I've never been there either. Mai said. Thinking of something, Mai suddenly said, I don't know what happened at the Bat Mountain, but we found something different on our hunting route. Oh. As soon as Xiao Xian heard this, he sat up straight and asked into the microphone, You can tell me if there are any abnormalities. Mountains, trees, rivers, beasts, etc. Anything. It's on the other side of the mountain. It's the mountain where a king beast lives. Mai said, where the king stoneworm is. Xiao Xian rarely went there now. Most of the time, he went to the green area with the advance group. Therefore, he did not know what happened on a mountain that Mai mentioned. That's it. Mai paused for a moment before voicing his doubts. Those of you who have taken that route should know that the markings left behind in the caves of the mountain won't be visible the next time you pass through. Xiao Xian nodded. Of course he remembered. There was a king's stoneworm at the bottom of the mountain. It was not a legend. Also, because of the king's stoneworm, the mountain would move under its influence. Some of the marks left on the cave walls would not be seen the next time they went there. Sometimes a rope thrown, there would be gone the next time they went there. The caves in the mountain were like intestines that could digest and absorb. They would absorb anything that had been left there for a long time without leaving any traces behind. The closer they went to the underground, the more obvious this phenomenon became. The marks on the caves would disappear faster too. This was also why people who took that route followed each other from generation to generation. They walked based on their own experience and memories. They did not simply leave marks. I didn't notice it at first, but when I went there a few times, I found a straw rope I threw there last time. Now that Mai thought about it, he regretted it. He didn't think too much about it back then. He thought that maybe the king's stoneworm had rested for a while, Or maybe it had gone somewhere else for a stroll. When it came back, the mountain would be back to normal. King Stoneworm. Xiao Xian was confused. Did something happen that even the King Stoneworm was affected? When did you discover that the cave was no longer swallowing the marks like before? Xiao Xian asked. A remorseful look appeared on Mai's face. When I first discovered it, it was before last winter, but I didn't think much of it at the time. However, at that time, there were many other threats in the cave, and there were many ferocious beasts that I had never seen before. When we came out of the cave, we paid more attention to those beasts. In other words, the changes in that mountain had already happened before winter, or even earlier. Maybe it's because of a natural disaster. Xiao Xian said. But that bat leader only arrived recently. Something that could affect it must have happened recently, too. There was a depressing silence in the room. If they could not find a reason, they would not be able to rest assured with such a huge threat lurking in the tribe and appearing every night. There was no fire seed in the tribe now. A beast of that level could quietly fly to the top of the mountain without anyone noticing. What should we do? Mai looked at Xiao Xian, then at the others. No one had any intention of speaking. They could not think of a suitable solution. We'll leave tomorrow and go to Bat Mountain to take a look. Also, we'll go to the mountain where the King Stoneworm used to live and see if we can find a reason, Xiao Xian said. That's the only way, but we have to guard the tribe well. Don't tell anyone about this until we find the reason. Otherwise, it will cause panic and give outsiders an opportunity to attack, Gigu said. After discussing the personnel arrangements, everyone left. However, no one could sleep tonight. The next day, after dawn, Xiao Xian asked Cha-Cha to take him, Ao, and 2 other leaders to the mountain. Ta, Mai, and the others took the ground. Caesar and I went together. Bats did not live on Bat Mountain in the past. But later, a leader emerged among the bats. They abandoned the small mountain with the sinkhole and took over the tall mountain. They even drove away all the other ferocious beasts in the mountain. Since then, the Yinjiao people called that mountain Bat Mountain. Xiao Xian looked at the mountain in the distance. Compared to the other mountains around it, that mountain gave off a faint sense of eeriness. And the closer he got, the clearer the feeling became. Because the bats occupied the mountain and drove away all the ferocious beasts in the mountain. Even if there were any ferocious beasts left, they would become food for the bats. As long as they were not careless beasts, they would not stay there. Who knew when they would be sucked dry by the bats? Because there were no other ferocious beasts on the mountain, even small ones, compared to the other mountains, it was exceptionally quiet and lifeless. In broad daylight, there were basically no bats flying out. It was eerily quiet. Xiao Xian did not enter the bat cave to search. Instead, he walked around. The bats are still here. They haven't left. The traces of activity are still fresh. There are bat droppings at the cave entrance, Xiao Xian said. So, only the bat leader left. Why would that be? Ao did not understand. That bat leader abandoned its minions and went to Yinjiao alone to steal grains every night. Xiao Xian could not think of a reason either. Let's go take a look at the King Stoneworm. Xiao Xian called Cha-Cha over and left with Ao and the other 2. They went to the mountain that they had not been to for a long time. Years ago, Xiao Xian had carried the remains of his ancestors out from there. If it were not for the ancestral bone ornaments, those remains would have been swallowed by the mountain. Once again, they came to the cave entrance that they had not seen for a long time. Xiao Xian looked at the handwriting on the cave entrance, bowed according to tradition, and then walked in. Chapter 677. Xiao Xian remembered that the animals living in this mountain were not very powerful. Because of the existence of the king beast, other powerful ferocious beasts were not allowed to live in this mountain. The weaker animals were no threat to the king beast, so it could ignore them. It was like a lion could ignore an ant, but it would not ignore a wolf that entered its territory. The Yinjiao tribe had lived here for nearly 1,000 years. Generations of hunting teams had passed through here and gone to the hunting grounds on the other side of the mountain. They rarely encountered any trouble in the cave. Only when new young warriors joined the team would the creatures living in the cave target them. Xiao Xian had encountered this in the past. Xiao Xian had not been here for a long time, but he knew what kind of creatures lived in the cave. However, when he walked into the cave, he clearly sensed many strange auras that should not have appeared here. It is indeed different. Xiao Xian remembered the path through the mountain. He didn't need Ma to lead the way. He could just follow the path in his memory. They were ambushed several times by some ferocious beasts hiding in the dark. Xiao Xian could handle them all. Otherwise, Ma would have told him about it. The stronger ferocious beasts in the forest should have known that the king's stoneworm used to live here, so they all stayed away. Even if the king's stoneworm was no longer here, they would still avoid this dangerous place for a short period of time. The higher the level of the beast, the sharper its senses. Even if the king's stoneworm was no longer in the mountain, the aura it had left behind would still have a deterrent effect on them. The tip of the sword pierced through a six-legged bug that attacked them and stabbed into the cave wall, leaving a dent in it. Not far from the dent, there were other marks left by sharp weapons. They were left behind by Mai's hunting team and had not disappeared yet. Walking in the cave, Xiao Xian released his senses to check if the king's stoneworm had really left. Xiao Xian could sense the fire seed aura on people within a certain range. Even those who had not merged with the fire seed would have some aura on them, just not as strong. When they were traveling downstream, Xiao Xian could sense the fire seeds of the tribes around the riverbank because of the same ability. That was because of the power of inheritance. Compared to the totemic power that strengthened the body, the power of inheritance was more of a spiritual power. The stronger the power of inheritance, the stronger the power of inheritance. Xiao Xian could sense the fire seeds far away because of the power of inheritance in his body. Actually, Xiao Xian could sense the bat leader's location in the 1,000-grain gold field because of this ability. He could sense it when he was digging for fire crystals, but it was too blurry back then. That night, when he sensed the bat leader, it was even clearer. It was just that the bat leader had hidden itself too well. If it were any other fearsome beast of the same level, Ao and the rest would have sensed it from that distance. However, Ao's power of inheritance was not as strong as his totemic power, so his senses were not as good as Xiao Xian's. There was one thing that Xiao Xian did not tell Ao and the rest. When he sensed the bat leader, he saw a spot of light similar to a fire seed. That bright spot of light was the bat leader. How could a fearsome beast have the power of a fire seed on it? What surprised Xiao Xian the most was that the power of a fire seed on the bat leader was a little bit similar to the power of the Yin Jiao's fire seed. He could feel the difference between the two, but the surprise was also obvious. If the power of the fire seed on the bat leader was 100%, then it was only 10% similar to the power of the Yin Jiao. Of the remaining 90%, 10% was similar to another power in Xiao Xian's body. The remaining 80% was completely different from the power of the Yin Jiao's fire seed. In Xiao Xian's sea of consciousness, there was not only the Yin Jiao's totemic flame, but also the light shield that covered the totemic flame. The power of the bat leader was similar to the power of the light shield. Perhaps, because of this, the bat leader did not attack the Yin Jiao people. It did not mean that it regarded the Yin Jiao people as its companions. Xiao Xian believed that the bat leader regarded the Yin Jiao people as its little brothers. But it was the little bit of similarity that made Xiao Xian very confused. The only thing that could connect the bat leader with the Yin Jiao was that the bat leader had absorbed the power of the fire crystals before it was separated from all the other bat leaders. And those fire crystals were burned by Xiao Xian with his own power. Xiao Xian did not know the real reason, and it was not the time to think about it. He just used the power of the fire seed and the bat leader to perceive the king's stoneworm under the mountain, which had not been known for many years. He had been in close contact with the king's stoneworm before, but he did not see it with his own eyes. But if he perceived the king's stoneworm again, he would definitely recognize it. Xiao Xian recalled the feeling of being almost petrified and turning every drop of sweat into stone. It was still very clear when he thought about it. Ao and the others, who were walking behind Xiao Xian, saw that Xiao Xian slowed down, but they did not urge him. Instead, they were on guard against the surroundings. If only Xiao Xian could use the rope divination to find out the reason. Ao thought in his heart. Xiao Xian sensed the surroundings. Because there were rocks all around, He could not perceive the fire seeds of other tribes like he could when he was on a long journey. Here, the range of his perception was greatly reduced. But according to Xiao Xian's memory, where the king's stoneworm had appeared, even if the range of his perception was reduced, as long as the king's stoneworm was still there, he should be able to detect it. However, nothing. Still nothing. Xiao Xian continued forward. He did not retract his perception. Even when he walked out of the cave and came to the other side of the mountain, he still could not detect the king's stoneworm. The king's stoneworm is indeed no longer here, Xiao Xian said. This was not good news for the Yinjiao people. They did not care about other beast territory changes, but it was different for a king beast. Generally speaking, king beasts would not easily change the location of their territory. For example, on the other side of the sea, the salt beast guarded its salt flats. Even if it was disturbed, it had no intention of leaving. Over here, the king's stoneworm that had not moved for 1,000 years had already left its nest. In fact, the king's stoneworm's territory was not small. The salt beast's territory was horizontal, more like flat land, but the king's stoneworm's was vertical. The mountain in front of them spanned an unknown distance. Although it was long and narrow, the peaks reached into the clouds. Very few birds could fly over it. Moreover, there was a large area underground. This place was not smaller than the salt flats. It was hard to understand why such a territory would be abandoned so easily. Xiao Xian went to find the cave he had carried his ancestors out of. He walked in for a while but did not go too deep. There were also some beasts that had not come close in the past. It was rare to see the bones of some small beasts. For this mountain that seemed to be able to swallow anything, bones and the like would not stay for long. But now, the leftovers of these predators had been left here for who knew how long. The king's stoneworm has indeed disappeared for a long time, Xiao Xian said to Ao and the others. Perhaps it left last year during the disaster. If the king's stoneworm had gone somewhere else, such as deeper into the forest, it would not have affected the Yinjiao tribe. But what if it had run to Yinjiao? The bat leader's movements were too sudden. If they did not figure it out, they would not be at ease. And if the king beast did not do anything else, everyone would think that it had gone deeper into the forest to find a new nest. Given its level, as long as it did not encounter other king beasts, the other beasts in the forest would have to make way for it. What should we do next? Ao thought of the bat leader walking around the Yinjiao tribe every day. He felt as if there was a huge rock pressing down on his heart. It was difficult for him to even breathe. He was worried that the huge rock would fall down and cause a bloody scene. As long as the Yinjiao people do not take the initiative to attack, the bat leader will not attack the Yinjiao people for the time being. After all, there were some similarities in the fire seed. If the bat leader wanted to attack the Yinjiao people, it would have already attacked them. But during this time, they had not heard of anyone disappearing for no reason. Also, tell the wanderers in the tribe not to run around. The bat leader may not attack the Yinjiao people, but I am not sure about the wanderers, Xiao Xian said. Although Ao did not understand the basis of Xiao Xian's words, he nodded in agreement. He also felt that the bat leader would not attack the Yinjiao people for the time being. After all, there were several opportunities to kill the Yinjiao people in the past, but the bat leader did not do so. But we can't go on like this. Even if the bat leader did not attack, with such a dangerous creature around, no one could sleep well. Xiao Xian thought for a moment and said, "You wait here for Mai and the others. I will go to the Bat Mountain to take a look." Okay. Ao took the other two to find a place to rest first and wait for Mai and the others. Xiao Xian asked Cha-Cha to take him to the Bat Mountain. Previously, Xiao Xian had only walked around the Bat Mountain once, but this time he planned to look around the Bat Mountain. There were several guesses about the bat leader's strange behavior. One of them was that it was affected by the king's stoneworm's strange behavior. After all, at its level, it would not be easily affected by other beasts. To rule out this possibility, Xiao Xian had to look around the Bat Mountain. Was there any strange phenomenon that forced the bat leader to give up on the Bat Mountain and run elsewhere? Not to mention that the bat leader liked the Yinjiao headquarters. If that was the case, it would have gone there last year. Why wait until now? The 1,000-grain gold was too far away from here, and it was not ripe yet. It was unlikely that it was attracted by that. Xiao Xian sat on the eagle's back and looked down at the forest below. Cha-Cha flew at a height that was neither too high nor too low. Not only could he see the scenery below clearly, but he could also avoid the ancient trees and possible threats on the trees. In the past, Cha-Cha had suffered because he flew too low and was dragged down from the sky. The Bat Mountain was not on the hunting route of Mai's hunting team. Xiao Xian did not go there often, so there were many places that were unfamiliar to him. Cha-Cha's flight path was circling around the Bat Mountain. In the forest, there was a huge difference in temperature between different places. Sometimes one side of the mountain was as cold as autumn, while the other side was as hot as summer. But in general, at this time of the year, the forest was still mostly green. The green ancient trees were the main color of the forest. The only thing that could compete with them were the tall mountains. From the middle of the mountain, there was a sharp decrease in the greenery. From green to gray rocks, and then to white snow on the mountain peak. The gray rocks on the cliffs separated the greenery under the blue sky. Xiao Xian was already used to such changes in color. But as he gradually flew out, Xiao Xian noticed something special. There was a short mountain there. Even if there were no trees on a normal short mountain, there would still be some grass. But there were only gray rocks there. As he flew closer, Xiao Xian could see more clearly. The gray-white short mountain stood out among the large expanse of ancient trees. Let's go down and take a look. Xiao Xian jumped down after Cha-Cha flew lower. He landed not far from the short mountain. Crack, crack, crack. Xiao Xian stepped on the grass. It was obviously not the soft grass. He looked down. Some of the green grass had turned gray and was still very hard. Some of the surrounding trees had also turned into the color of rocks. The closer he got to the short mountain, the more obvious the change was. At the edge of the short mountain, there were many rocks that looked like tree trunks. They used to be trees, but the upper half was broken. Only the lower half was left. Even the texture of the bark was very clear. Petrification. Others might not know about this change, but Xiao Xian already had a guess. Among all the people and beasts that Xiao Xian had seen, only the king stoneworm could do this. What was it doing here instead of in its own nest? Xiao Xian walked up the short mountain. He could sense that the king stoneworm was not nearby, so he was not worried that he would be petrified as well. There was not a single blade of grass or tree growing on the short mountain. The rocks looked new. The king stoneworm had not been here for long. He continued walking up the short mountain. At the top of the short mountain, there was a round hole about 2 meters wide. Xiao Xian squatted at the hole and looked down. He did not know how deep it was. Based on the curvature of the hole, the king stoneworm should have come out from underground. It just did not come out completely. It only poked its head out for a bit before going back underground. Because of the king stoneworm's movements, the ground had bulged and formed this short mountain made of rocks. Even the trees and flowers nearby had been petrified. The hole on the short mountain had narrowed as the king stoneworm retreated underground. When it had hardened completely, it could not shrink any further. That was how it was now. The Yinjiao people had thought that the king stoneworm's size should be about the same as the hole in the mountain. However, Xiao Xian felt that the king stoneworm should be bigger than the hole in the mountain. Just like the hole in the short mountain, as the king stoneworm left, the hole would shrink to varying degrees. However, these were all Xiao Xian's guesses. He had never seen the king stoneworm with his own eyes. Standing on the short mountain, Xiao Xian looked at the Bat Mountain. It was not close. Otherwise, Xiao Xian and the others would have discovered it when they first approached the Bat Mountain. However, it was not too far. At this distance, perhaps the Bat Leader could sense it. Could it really be because of the king stoneworm that the Bat Leader was forced to leave the Bat Mountain and go to Yinjiao? After all, in the Bat Leader's eyes, the Yinjiao people might be its underlings. Unable to be sure, Xiao Xian had Cha-Cha take him into the air to continue searching. They wanted to see if there were any more short mountains like this, especially in the direction of the Yinjiao tribe. If they found it in the direction of the Yinjiao tribe, then the Yinjiao people would be in big trouble. No one wanted to fight a king beast, even if the Flaming Horn tribe thought of the king stoneworm as a peaceful beast. Otherwise, they wouldn't have set up a hunting route that had lasted for almost 1,000 years. None of them had ever been attacked by the king's stoneworm. However, no one could say for sure what would happen if they went up against the king's stoneworm. Fortunately, Xiaoxian did not find any more short mountains like this one after searching in the direction of the tribe. Even so, he could not be completely relieved. Where did it go? Xiaoxian went back to the short mountain. Xiaoxian told Ao and the others had also come over. How about I go down and take a look? Xiaoxian said. Since the king's stoneworm had gone through a place, there must be a tunnel underground. They could follow this tunnel to find out where the king's stoneworm was. Chapter 678. Following the underground path was indeed the best way to find the king's stoneworm, but it was also very dangerous. After some discussion, Xiaoxian, Ao, and Ta went down to search. There was no need to go with too many people. It would be inconvenient if there were too many people. They put a rope down from the cave and slid down. They didn't have long straw ropes, so they tied several straw ropes together. They slid down for about 100 meters before landing on the ground. This meant that the king's stoneworm moved up from here, then retreated down this path. Then, it changed directions and continued moving. Which way should we go? Ao looked at the two paths and couldn't make up his mind. There were two paths after they came down. One was the way the king's stoneworm came from, and the other was the way it left. Xiaoxian looked carefully at the patterns on the stone wall. He touched the stone wall and pointed in one direction. It went that way, but let's go the other way first. Xiaoxian wanted to see if the king's stoneworm came from that direction. Did it pass by Bat Mountain? If that was the case, then the movement of the bat leader could be explained. Ao and Ta understood what Xiaoxian meant, so they didn't object. They followed the direction the king stoneworm came from. Even though they were underground, Xiaoxian memorized the position on the ground before entering the cave. He had a universal eye in his hand. It can tell the direction without any sunlight or moonlight. Ta was surprised. Yes, Xiaoxian said. When he was asking the tribesmen about this, he heard them mention that they used the universal eye when they were underground. However, only people with high status in the tribe had the universal eye. After all, the universal eye was rare, so the Jing tribe didn't give it out often. To prove Xiaoxian's words, under the light of the water-moon stone, a line opened up on the universal eye in Xiaoxian's hand. It was like a narrowed beast's eye. As the line expanded, the direction became clearer. Ao and Ta were both good with directions. As long as they knew the approximate position of the sun and estimated the current time, they could determine where Bat Mountain was. He continued to walk along the passageway. They came from there. Tower confirmed. The more they walked, the more certain they were that the passage came from the Bat Mountain. Increasing their speed, the three of them soon arrived at the Bat Mountain. How did he know that it was Bat Mountain? In addition to his own estimation, there was an upward passage there, but the passage didn't directly lead to the surface. It only extended from the underground for more than 20 meters. Do you think it's because the king's stoneworm noticed the bat leader's tracks when it came here? That's why it wanted to go to the ground. But the bat leader reacted quickly and ran away as soon as the king's stoneworm moved. Is it possible? Ao voiced out his speculation. That is indeed a possibility, Ta agreed. Bat Mountain should be above us. Even if it's not directly below us, it shouldn't be too far away. But why would the king's stoneworm come out of its nest? Even if it's because of the cataclysm, after it came out of its nest, it should have returned after the cataclysm ended. Xiaoxian was puzzled. Maybe the king's stoneworm wanted to change its location? Ta suggested. Xiaoxian didn't deny it. Let's continue walking in that direction. The three of them followed the direction the king's stoneworm had come out of and continued to run in the 100-meter underground cave. There wasn't enough oxygen here. The further they went from the small mountain, the thinner the air became. This wasn't the king's stoneworm's nest, so there wasn't much ventilation. Fortunately, the three of them had a high tolerance for the thin air. If they were beginner or intermediate totemic warriors, they might not have been able to hold on. Ao and Ta also wanted to know why the king's stoneworm was running around after it came out of its nest. However, they soon found out why the king's stoneworm didn't run back, but ran in another direction instead. Not far from Bat Mountain, There was a fault where the passageway was cut off. Moreover, there were traces of the king's stoneworm making a turn here. This place should have been like this for a while. Only the cataclysm last year could cause such changes underground, AO said. That means the king's stoneworm might have been shocked by the cataclysm last year, so it left its nest and ran here in the chaos. However, the underground was also greatly affected by the cataclysm, so it couldn't find its way back after it came out. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Even if the king's stoneworm couldn't go back the way it came, it could have gone somewhere else. Why did it continue to run away? What if it couldn't tell the direction? Xiao Xian suggested a possibility. Ao and Ta fell silent. A king beast couldn't tell the direction? Shouldn't the higher the level, the smarter it was? We can't rule out this possibility, Ao said in the end. Xiao Xian sensed the surroundings. The stone walls here are much thicker than the other parts of the passageway. Maybe the king's stoneworm stayed here for a longer time. The longer the king's stoneworm stayed in a place, the more petrified that place would be. Xiao Xian could sense that the surrounding stone walls were different from the stone soil underground. It was a special kind of stone that the king's stoneworm had petrified. Maybe the king's stoneworm left its nest during the cataclysm last year and ran here in a panic. It might have stayed here for a long time, or it might have fallen asleep. When it woke up, the original path had been cut off by the changes underground, so it continued to move forward. Xiao Xian didn't want to think of the king's stoneworm so badly, but this was the most likely possibility. If that was the case, the three of them could only sigh. This intelligence, no matter what the truth is, let's keep looking. Since they had reached the end of the passageway, the next step was to search in the direction the king's stoneworm had left. Hopefully, it wasn't in the direction of Yinjiao. The three of them were hopeful. They returned to the hill and told the others what they had found. After a short rest and some food, Xiao Xian and the other two continued to search along the passageway. 100 meters below the ground, the three of them ran along the same passageway. Along the way, the three of them found another hill that was similar to the one they had seen before. This proved that the king's stoneworm had appeared here before. It should have happened within the past 2 days. Xiao Xian looked at the petrified trees around the hill. Even the roots of the trees had been petrified, but the leaves on the treetops were still green and vibrant. The branches and leaves weren't wilting either. Based on his understanding of the forest, this wouldn't have happened more than 2 days ago. Let's keep looking. Ao was getting more and more anxious. Although they weren't heading directly towards Yinjiao, they weren't far off. Please don't head towards Yinjiao. Please don't. Ao kept repeating these words in his heart. However, the further they searched, the heavier their hearts became. Xiao Xian looked at the universal eye in his hand and sensed their surroundings. This is the Flaming River? How is this possible? Ao and Ta exclaimed at the same time. Were they already at the Flaming River? But how could it be the Flaming River? Wasn't the Flaming River filled with water? That wasn't right either. Before the disaster, the river was more than 100 meters deep. After the disaster, the river wasn't that deep anymore. At most, it was a few dozen meters deep. Of course, some parts of the river might be even deeper, but now wasn't the time to think about this. Ao gathered his thoughts and pointed above his head. He asked Xiao Xian, "Are you sure this is the Flaming River?" "Most likely. There aren't any hard rocks not far from here, so it should be muddy water. Further away, there's water." Xiao Xian couldn't tell the exact distance, but he could sense that there were muddy water and muddy water above them. Compared to rocks, muddy water and muddy water didn't affect his senses as much. Plus, if they kept walking in this direction, they should be near the Flaming River, upstream of where Yan Jiao's headquarters were. In the past, when Xiao Xian was free, he would let Cha-Cha carry him upstream for a while. "So that means the king's stoneworm has already crossed the river?" Ta asked. "That's right. Although the king's stoneworm wouldn't have crossed the river towards Yan Jiao's headquarters, the three of them were slightly relieved. However, the Flaming River trading point was also on the other side of the river. If that place was attacked, it would be a huge loss for Yan Jiao. "Let's keep going." Ta was so worried he wanted to pull his hair out. They had been on guard for so long, but they didn't see anyone from the other side. They also didn't see the troublesome bandit. They thought the bat leader was already a big problem, but they didn't expect an even bigger problem. If it weren't for their strong mental fortitude, they would have panicked too. No matter where the king's stoneworm went, the three of them would continue to search along this path. If we find anything strange, we'll retreat immediately, Xiao Xian said. Tracking the king's stoneworm was important, but his own life was more important. He couldn't afford to lose his life because of this. That was a king beast they were talking about. Plus, they were almost 100 meters underground. The terrain was advantageous for the king's stoneworm. If they really fought, the three of them would be crushed. As Xiao Xian and the other two continued to track the king's stoneworm in a forest outside the flaming river trading point. They were quite a distance away from the flaming river trading point. After Yin Jiao expanded their patrols outside the trading point, some robbers had no choice but to retreat from their hunting area. They wanted to rob and get something, but they didn't want to go against Yin Jiao. What do you think those Yin Jiao people are thinking? What a busybody. Our robbery has nothing to do with them. A person sitting on a tree said as he played with a dagger made from animal bone. Who knows? I don't like them anyway. I won't go into the flaming river trading point. A muscular man with a full beard and unkempt hair said in a low, muffled voice. A voice came from the thick grass nearby. The last time I went there, those Yin Jiao guards almost burned a hole in me. TSK, do they think I care about the things in their trading point? Even if they invite me next time, I won't go in. That's right, I won't go in no matter what. We'll just rob outside. We won't have to face those annoying Yin Jiao people, Another person sitting on the tree said as he slapped his thigh. They were a group of robbers outside the flaming river trading point. There were more than 20 of them hiding here. Originally, there were about 50 of them, but they were in other places. If they found any prey, they would be notified. When they robbed, they would only choose those traveling teams that had fewer people and seemed easy to bully. They would not risk robbing those who were obviously not to be trifled with. Robbing also depended on one's eyesight. Those who did not have good eyesight would not even know how they died, not to mention robbing. The robber who was torn to pieces a few days ago was one of them. He didn't have good eyesight and robbed a weirdo who looked more like a beast than Yin Jiao. He deserved to be torn to pieces. As for the person who said he was almost burned a hole in his body by the Yin Jiao guards when he entered the trading point, it was actually because a Yin Jiao patrol outside the trading point encountered them. They even killed a few of them. Luckily, they ran fast enough and weren't caught. Not long after that, they decided to enter the trading point to take a look and see if anyone had good stuff. They would wait for those people to leave the trading point before making their move. The Yin Jiao guards felt that their auras were familiar, so they kept staring at them. They were so nervous that they almost ran back. However, after that incident, they never entered the trading point again. They were worried that they would be caught by the Yin Jiao guards. They hated the Yin Jiao guards who stopped them from robbing. The few of them were spitting spittle as they criticized the Yin Jiao guards. Suddenly, one of the people in the tree looked at them sharply. What's going on? An extremely dangerous aura filled the air, but he wasn't sure where it came from. He looked around and didn't see anyone else. Yin Jiao patrols wouldn't patrol here. Who's here? The others stopped talking and went on alert. The forest suddenly became eerily quiet. Only then did they realize that something terrible had happened. Before, they could still hear the chirping of birds, but they didn't pay attention to it. Now that they stopped talking, they noticed the change. The first person to notice that something was wrong had cold sweat dripping down his forehead. He still couldn't find the source of the aura. It seemed to be coming from all directions. Moreover, the feeling was getting stronger and stronger. Even the slowest person in the group felt a chill that made his scalp feel like it was going to explode. His hand holding his knife was shaking uncontrollably. Generally speaking, when they didn't know what was going on, they would quietly hide and observe. However, this aura that shook their minds made it impossible for them to remain calm. Where? Where was it? Everyone held their breaths and observed their surroundings. Even a movement of a flying insect would be detected by them. Nothing. Still nothing. Where did that aura that made them unable to even muster the courage to resist come from? There was no one around, not even a bird. Even the insects seemed to have disappeared at this moment. It was dead silent. Even the wind seemed to have frozen. Crack, 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 crack. A faint sound came, stimulating their nerves. It was the sound of movement coming from beneath their feet. When they finally looked down, everyone was so scared that their souls almost flew out of their bodies. Chapter 679. On the ground, the originally green grass and leaves started to turn gray from bottom to top. They did not look as flexible as before and became as still as stone. Not even the slightest tremor could be seen. No, it was not just the grass. On the ground, whether it was the soil or the flowers and trees, all of them were undergoing the same change. The brown bark, the green leaves, the yellow soil, all of them became the same color. Like the mutated grass, they became stiff. What was going on? How could it cause such a terrifying change to occur in this area? Manpower? No, they had never seen anyone who could change everything in such a large area like this. No matter what, the horrifying scene in front of them was beyond their knowledge. Looking at the changes that were spreading up from the ground, a cold chill penetrated the soles of their feet and spread to their entire bodies. It was as if they were not in the forest, but trapped in a vast glacier. The trembling from their bones stimulated their nerves. They could not stay here any longer. Run! The people who reacted the fastest had already exploded with their greatest power. At this time, they could not think of hiding anymore. They tried their best to raise their totemic power to the limit. The aura that appeared on their bodies with the increase of their totemic power, if it was in the past, would be as obvious as a fire in the dark night. But at this moment, under the suffocating aura, it was like smoke rising in the wind. Before anyone could see it clearly, it had already disappeared. Pale, tiny. They were originally staying on the tree, but now they were jumping to other branches like monkeys running in a panic in the forest. The great fear made them unconsciously let out some meaningless screams. Other than running for their lives, they didn't even have the time to think about anything else. From the corner of their eyes, they saw that the ground under their feet was no longer a land of life with a mixture of colors. It was a land of death full of gray. All the plants, the insects hidden in the ground, and the insects in the leaves, none of them were spared. They had already felt some changes in their bodies. It was only because of the strong resistance of the totemic power in their bodies that the changes were slowed down. But with the rapid approach of the huge aura that came from nowhere, the totemic power in their bodies would soon be useless, like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. The trees around them had already started to turn grayish-white, as if an invisible hand was smearing the surroundings with grayish-white paint. Now, that pair of large hands was sweeping towards them. Quick! Quick, quick, quick! Ah! A hysterical scream suddenly rang out. Those whose hearts were already filled with fear felt their hearts jump to their throats, and the chill on their backs became even more intense. Not only did the strong-willed people not stop, they even roared and ran even faster. He didn't dare to look back. He was worried that the little bit of courage and the courage to run for his life would be completely destroyed after he turned back. However, among these people, there were also some who turned their heads to look. After hearing the scream, they turned their heads to look at the place where the scream came from. They could naturally tell who the scream came from. Before this accident happened, that person was still hiding in the grass, squatting comfortably. However, when they turned their heads, they only saw a person whose legs had turned grayish-white on the ground. His hands that were supporting him on the ground were also rapidly undergoing the same change as his legs. The part of his body that was close to the ground was not spared. Moreover, this change was rapidly spreading to his entire body. The person who was lying on the ground, unable to escape, raised his head and looked in the direction that his companions had left. His eyes were filled with pain, fear, and despair. But soon, that pair of eyes became deathly still. Then, they were covered with a layer of grayish-white, until his entire body turned grayish-white like the surroundings. He was like a lifeless human statue. The top half of a grayish-white tree next to him snapped and fell, smashing onto the human statue. Bam! The human statue cracked. A crack that stretched from the left shoulder to the right waist split the human statue into two halves. Only the center of the crack had some red color. It looked like blood, but before the blood dripped, the only red color turned grayish-white. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. The people who saw this felt their minds explode. The little bit of air in their chest was suddenly diverted. They even forgot to breathe. Their legs turned to jelly, and the totemic power in their bodies became chaotic. In their panic, they neglected the branches in front of them and tripped. Two of them staggered and fell from the tree. If they were on the tree, they still had a chance to escape. However, after falling on the ground, their chances were slim. The fall just now did not feel like they had fallen on grass or mud. It felt more like they had fallen on a rock. If they did not look back, would they not have fallen? They did not care about the pain from the fall, nor did they have time to regret. They could only try their best to escape this place. They even swore in their hearts that they would never come to the flaming river trading point again. However, they felt their legs getting weaker and weaker. They became heavy and stiff. They could not feel anything, as if they had lost control of their bodies. Thud! Finally, they could no longer run and fell. No, save me. They had also experienced what their comrade had felt before he died. However, this time, no one would slow down. The people who were running at the front had already disappeared. Those who were slow to escape had the same fate as them. Soon, there were no more sounds in the forest. There was only an expanding grayish-white color. At the same time, Zheng Luo, who was guarding the flaming river trading point, was thinking absent-mindedly. He already knew that Xiao Xian and the rest had noticed the bat leader and the king stoneworm's strange movements. His biggest worry now was not the people who had sneaked into the flaming river trading point, but the elusive king beast. They had worked so hard to build a trading zone with a bright future. If a beast king were to show up, everything would be ruined. Boss, those people you mentioned, some of them want to look for EC. Duo Kong came in and said. When Zheng Luo noticed that people suspected to be from the other side of the sea had snuck into the trading point, he had asked Duo Kong to keep an eye on them. The weaker warriors were not up to this task. The other party's disguise could fool many warriors, but people at Zheng Luo and Duo Kang's level could tell. However, before they knew the other party's motive, they did not want to alert them. After all, there were a lot of problems at hand. After hearing Duo Kang's report, Zheng Luo wiped his face in annoyance. What did they do? I don't think they did anything. They just sat together and talked. They seem to know we're watching them, but they didn't try to avoid us. Duo Kong did not know why they were here. Ignore them for now. Keep an eye on the surroundings. Boss, do you think that King Stoneworm will come here? Duo Kong was worried too. I don't know. Wait for news. Xiao Xian and the rest have already gone to track it. The forest is so big. It probably won't come here. Oh. Duo Kong scratched his ears and cheeks. He could not calm down. The experience of facing a king beast was a nightmare. He would rather die than go through it again. After sitting for a while, Duo Kong left again. Instead of waiting here, he would rather keep an eye on the suspicious people. The person that Duo Kong and Zheng Luo thought was suspicious was sitting in EC's house. He was wearing a hairless, sleeveless shirt made of animal hide, coarse linen pants, and a colorful snakeskin belt around his waist. Several bags made of linen and animal hide were hanging from a belt. He wore an ornament made of animal bones around his neck. His exposed arm was painted with some dark green paint. His unkempt and coarse hair was casually tied up with a straw rope. Because his hair was not long, after it was tied up, it stood straight up towards the sky. His dressing was quite characteristic of the tribes who often came to the trading point. The man sized up EC's house with a critical gaze. He smacked his lips and concluded, "This place is even better than the one you're living in. Of course. Why else would I come here?" EC took out a ceramic cup and poured some water into it. He made this cup himself after coming here. The painting on it was also done by him. It was the same as the utensils he used on the other side of the sea. It was still more convenient to use something familiar. The person didn't hold back either. After drinking the water in the cup, he said, "Another cup. I ran around in the morning. It's so hot." But Yinjiao's trading point is not to be underestimated. The style is to my liking. Don't tell me you're here to steal Yinjiao's place? EC asked. Of course not. I don't care about such a big place. But I do want to cause some trouble for Yinjiao. I want to see how capable they are. You guys sure know how to make fun of yourselves. But Yinjiao people aren't easy to provoke. Once they get angry, it'll be hard to stop, EC said. The person sitting across from him pursed his lips. He didn't take EC's words to heart. We're from Changle. Why would we be afraid of them getting angry? Getting angry is the fun part. Wu-hee, since you lent me your long-winged bird, I'll give you a word of advice, EC said slowly. Speak. The person sitting there swung his feet that were covered with tattered straw sandals, looking relaxed and at ease. Don't provoke Yinjiao people. Even if you want to provoke them, now is not the time. Hey kid, I thought you didn't know the E family's divination skills? Why does it seem like you know something? We didn't take EC's words to heart. He was from Changle. Perhaps no one here knew about it, but he was quite well known on the other side of the sea. Changle wasn't just a tribe. It was a special group of people with different backgrounds. They liked to take risks and were very curious. In their words, most of the things in the world were boring, so they wanted to use their sharp eyes to find some fun. To put it more simply, they were a group of curious adventurers. They were also the first group of people to come from the other side of the sea. As for why they rarely showed themselves, it was because most of them hadn't mastered the language here. If they couldn't even communicate, how could they find any fun? If they wanted to ask for directions, it would be like a chicken talking to a duck. They wouldn't understand. If the tribesmen here were the most disgusted with robbers, then on the other side of the sea, whether it was the tribes or the slave masters, the most disgusted were the Changle people. They were a group of lunatics. When they were bored, they would go and provoke others. They built their own happiness on other people's troubles. When the people on the other side of the sea learned that the Changle people had crossed the sea and were heading here, they all breathed a sigh of relief. They felt like the flies that had been buzzing around them had finally disappeared. But now, no one knew that the Changle people's first target was Yinjiao. However, not all of them had crossed the sea. They were all holed up somewhere to train, learn the language, and gather information. One needed skills to be able to attract the ire of others. Well, he was just one of the people who had mastered the language here. EC wasn't angry at Wu-hee's sarcastic words. It's up to you to believe it or not. Since you lent me 2 long-winged birds, I'll say it again. You should leave this place as soon as possible. Something big is going to happen here. Aha, something big. That's even better. You shouldn't leave. As soon as Wu-hee finished speaking, he suddenly paused and looked in a direction. EC glanced at the sky outside the window, then looked at Grasshopper, who had been hiding in the corner. It's here. What's here? What do you mean? Wu-hee looked at EC, then at Grasshopper. Grasshopper had beast blood, so his control over his totemic power wasn't very precise. Normally, he couldn't completely hide his totemic patterns. But now, the patterns on his body were even clearer, like those on a beast. His thick hair stood up like stone needles. Poochie, short spikes protruded from Ching Fu's back. His sunken eyes were filled with fear. He shrank into a corner. He was so big that he could touch the roof with a single jump. But now, he wanted nothing more than to bury himself in the ground. Why are you so scared? Wu-hee raised his eyebrows and looked in the direction of the strange aura. Because he was far away, he didn't feel it very strongly. But even so, it was enough to make his heart jump. It wasn't just them. Zheng Luo and the others in the Flaming River Castle, as well as the sharper people in the trading point, all felt it. What was going on? At the entrance of the trading point, Kuin Tu and the others were guarding the entrance, cautiously watching the people going in and out. Zheng Luo said there were suspicious people moving around the Flaming River trading point these 2 days, but they couldn't find out who they were. This could only mean that the other party was very skilled at disguising themselves. Suddenly, there was a sharp and urgent whistle from the patrol team. This was a warning signal. Someone's coming. Kuin Tu stared in that direction. Soon, they saw 7 people running out of the forest. But these 7 people were very strange. Their bodies were covered in different degrees of gray. At first, they thought it was paint, but when they got closer, they realized it was more like stone. These 7 people looked crazy, as if they had seen something extremely terrifying. They roared hoarsely as they ran. When they saw Kuin Tu and the others, their eyes lit up and they shouted, "Help!" Not long ago, They said they would never enter the flaming river trading point again. But when they ran for their lives, they split into two groups. One group ran to another place, but the 7 of them felt safer with more people. If there were more people, even if they ran, there would be others to share the burden. In this area, the only place with more people was Yinjiao's trading point. That was why they ran all the way here. Of course, Kuan-Tu wouldn't let them enter the trading point, so he tied them up with the others. But the people who were tied up were still struggling, shouting at the top of their lungs, "They're coming! They're behind us! Behind us!" Kuan-Tu didn't know what they were talking about. He wanted to knock them out, but even though they looked crazy, they might know something. So he sent them to Zhongluo. When these people were struggling, the grayish-white, stone-like things on their bodies seemed to be growing in their flesh. As they struggled and pulled, those stone-like places separated from their flesh. However, the 7 people did not care about the bleeding wounds on their bodies and continued to madly repeat those words. "Boss, what did they see?" Duo Kang's voice was shaking. Kuan-Tu didn't understand, but Duo Kong already had a guess. He just didn't want to believe it. How could this be? How could he be so unlucky? No, it couldn't be what he thought. Duo Kong tried to brainwash himself. But in the next moment, Zheng Luo shattered Duo Kang's hope. Zheng Luo's voice was hoarse. He gripped his knife so hard his knuckles turned white. "Spread the word. There's a king beast nearby." Thud! Kuan-Tu let go, and the people who were tied up fell to the ground. King beast. Kuan-Tu felt a chill run down his spine. The people who were tied up heard Zheng Luo's words and struggled even harder. Their hoarse voices sounded like they were going to bleed. "Let me go. I want to leave." Leave? Why were they stupid enough to come here? They should have run as far as they could. Duo Kong didn't care about those people anymore. With Zheng Luo's words in mind, he walked to the top of the flaming river tower, took a deep breath, and shouted, "All of you, listen up. There's a king beast nearby. Everyone, be careful." Zheng Luo was an advanced totemic warrior. With his full strength, almost everyone in the trading area could hear his words. The bustling trading point froze for a moment, as if digesting this sudden news. But very soon, it was an uproar. The king beast was here. This was like a bomb thrown into the water, creating huge waves in the flaming river trading point. The king beast was here. What should they do? Run, of course. Stay here and wait for death. Wu He, who was drinking water in EC's room, spat out the water in his mouth, threw the cup away, and jumped out the window. "Why are you running? Didn't you want to watch the show? Didn't you want to have fun here?" EC shouted at Wu He's back. "We're here to have fun, not to die. You can stay here if you want." F***CK. No wonder I'm trembling. It's a king beast. Wu He immediately ran out of the trading point. The trading point was in chaos. People were screaming and yelling as they packed their things and left. For people who rarely saw living ferocious beasts, beast kings were legendary creatures. But that didn't stop them from fearing beast kings. In the stories passed down by their ancestors, beast kings were invincible. Almost all people who went up against beast kings would die. However, there were also some exceptions among them. Ha ha ha! I've waited for so many years, and it's finally here. I'm not leaving. I want to see the king beast. Someone clenched his fists and shouted, his face red with excitement. The people around him looked at him as if he was crazy. "You'll die if you don't run." His companions tried to persuade him again. "So be it. What's there to be afraid of? I want to see what a king beast looks like. I want to stay. Don't stop me." He was hopeless. Seeing how stubborn he was, the people around him gave up. There was no time to waste here. They quickly packed their things and left. Let the idiots who wanted to see the Beast King throw away their lives die there. Chapter 680. Because of Duo Kang's roar, all the traveling teams that were trading in the Flaming River trading point, as well as the tribesmen who had set up their stalls along the river, all packed up and left. They closed their windows and doors, took all their goods out, and rushed towards the 3 main doors. Some people did not have a clear idea of what a king beast was, but when they saw the others running for their lives, they were moved by the atmosphere. According to the others, it was not good to stay, so they should just run for their lives. Yanjiao's patrols and gatekeepers were summoned to the open space inside the flaming river castle. Zheng Luo would tell them what to do next. Even with Zheng Luo and Duo Kong here, the word King Beast was the biggest source of fear. "Boss, what do we do now?" Duo Kong asked Zheng Luo anxiously. Zheng Luo couldn't make up his mind. Who knew they would encounter something like this? "Let's see if there's any news from the tribe." Zheng Luo had already sent someone back to the headquarters to inform them of what happened here. They would definitely send someone over immediately. No matter what, there's no use panicking now. Guard the trading point well, and don't let anyone take advantage of us. Duo Kong could only order his men to clear the trading point. Most of the outsiders would definitely leave, but only a few would stay. They had to keep an eye on those who stayed behind. Plus, they definitely wouldn't let those people run around at a time like this. They had to restrict their movements and send people to keep an eye on them. Soon, Gigu brought his men over. When he heard the news, he wanted to slam the table. The thing he was most worried about had happened. Where's Xiao Xian and the others? Duo Kong had been waiting for them. When they encountered the salt beast in the salt mines, it was Xiao Xian who blocked it for them. Now, the person he trusted the most was not Gigu, the current chief, or Xiao Xian, the former chief, but Xiao Xian, the Grand Elder. The others who had the same experience as Duo Kong also looked at Gigu, wanting to hear from him about Xiao Xian. They haven't returned yet. Gigu had never faced a king stoneworm before, so he couldn't make the decision on his own. This time, it was the king stoneworm. In the entire Yinjiao tribe, Xian was the only one who had come into close contact with the king stoneworm. What should we do now? They were still in the forest and had not returned. If the king stoneworm came directly to the trading point, should we fight it, or should I avoid it? Duo Kong was anxious. It was not hard to imagine the consequences of fighting the Beast King head-on. He might be able to stop the Beast King, but he would have to pay a heavy price. On the other hand, if he chose to run away, he would have to give up on the trading zone. Since the establishment of the Flaming River trading point, they had put in a lot of effort. No one could bear to give it up just like that. Prepare for both scenarios, Gigu said. If there's no other choice, we can only endure it. If we can't, we can only give up. It was impossible for more people to lose their lives because of this trading area. Let's hope that the King Stoneworm is only there and will leave soon. I hope it doesn't come towards us, Guangyi sighed. At this moment, someone said, if there's a fire seed, he didn't finish a sentence, but everyone understood what he meant. If the ancient fire seed was still there, it would definitely be a deterrent to fearsome beasts. Even if it was a king beast, it should still be effective. After all, Yinjiao's fire seed was stronger than the average small to medium-sized tribe. However, the ancient fire seed was about to disappear. There was always a price to pay. It was impossible for everything to be perfect. When it came to the fire seed, they could only choose one. They chose to merge. But didn't the Grand Elder say that as long as there are people, there will be a fire seed? There are many of us. When we gather together, we can release the fire seed's aura. Maybe it'll be useful? Kuan Tu said from nearby. Makes sense. Zheng Luo looked in the direction where the king beast had appeared. The aura did not come closer, but it did not leave either. Its presence was only getting stronger. Even the dullest people could feel the oppressive aura that made their legs tremble. Whoosh, Gigu whistled. He gestured toward the sky. Keep an eye on that direction. A snow-white shadow flew across the sky. It was Gigu's snow-white falcon. Cha-Cha was not here, so they had to let it go. After all, the sky was much safer than the ground. They could also observe the king stoneworm's movements clearly. While Gigu and Zheng Luo were discussing, the people who had rushed out of the trading point were all running away from the king beast. Of course, there were also people who wanted to take the opportunity to rob. After all, everyone had brought a lot of things with them. Some greedy people would inevitably have evil thoughts when they saw this. I can't believe they're still thinking of robbing at a time like this. In the sky, Wu He sat on a long-winged bird, looking down at the panicking crowd. However, those who could come here were not kind people. They might not lose to the fearsome beasts in the forest when they were angry. They did not hold back against robbers. You want to rob me? Fine, I'll at least leave an arm behind. Wu patted his long-winged bird, gesturing for it to fly towards the king beast. Although he did not have the guts to stay in the trading point, he wanted to see what the king beast looked like from afar. Coo! The long-winged bird chirped unwillingly. It did not want to fly there. All beasts would not want to go there. Why would they go there? Did they want to die? I won't go near it. I'll just take a look from afar. You want to see what the king beast looks like too, right? On the other side of the sea, Wu had gone deep into the forest with the Tranquil people when he was young. He had once felt the king beast's aura up close. Although he did not see what the king beast looked like, that soul-stirring feeling was still engraved in his mind. He remembered that the Tranquil old man who had brought him around had warned him to run as far as he could if he encountered a king beast in the future. Of course, suicidal people were a different story. Apart from that, those who did not want to commit suicide but still went to the king beast were true warriors. Don't think that was a compliment. To the Tranquil people, true warriors meant the same thing as brainless idiots. Now, Wu had just arrived, and he had encountered another one. He could not help but sigh at his luck. Moreover, he did not want to commit suicide, and he did not want to be a true warrior. That was why he did not stay in the trading point like EC. Instead, he summoned his long-winged bird and flew away. However, Wu was like the other Tranquil people. He had an incomparably curious heart and was afraid of death. That was why he would not go near the source of danger. Instead, he would sneak a peek from afar to satisfy his curiosity so that he could show off when he met the other Tranquil people in the future. Yin Jiao even tamed a bird. Wu watched as the white figure flew out of the flaming river castle like lightning towards the king beast. Wu retracted his gaze and slapped the long-winged bird's neck. Did you see that? It's not even afraid of that size. What are you afraid of? Coo! The long-winged bird let out an aggrieved cry. Others might not understand, but Wu knew what it meant. The long-winged bird was saying that although the bird that flew out of the flaming river castle was small, it was fast and could escape much faster than them. Although the long-winged bird was unwilling, it could only listen to its master's orders. It flapped its wings and flew towards the king beast. After flying through a forest, they could see a path opened up in the forest. Compared to the other direction, there was not a single person here. Even flying beasts were nowhere to be seen. The king beast deterrence was still quite strong. Wherever the king beast was, all other beasts would retreat. What kind of king beast is it? Wu looked down curiously until he saw a gray-white forest. Yes, a gray-white forest. The long-winged bird was already trembling. Even if it was in the air and would not come into close contact with the king beast's aura made it feel suppressed even in the air. After flying in that direction for a while, it did not go any closer. Instead, it flew around the forest. The forest in front of it was all gray-white. There were no other colors. That's turned into stone. Wu was shocked. Such a large forest had actually turned into stone. As the long-winged bird flew around the forest, Wu saw the king beast that caused all this commotion. The king beast looked like a giant wriggling worm. Its color was not gray-white like the forest, but more like the color of melted rocks. Wu had been to a volcano before. The volcano's mouth had melted rocks all year round, but they were not crimson red like during an eruption. The only difference was that the color was different from normal rocks. Now, this king beast color was the same as the gray melted rocks he saw at the volcano's mouth. However, unlike the crater of a volcano, there wasn't any heat here. The temperature was still high, but when they approached the petrified forest, they felt a chill rolling around their bodies. The hair on the back of their necks was about to stand up from the wind. We did not go any closer. He just watched from afar. The king beast wriggled on the ground, making a rumbling sound. Everything in the forest, be it trees or rocks, was crushed into a smooth stone path. There were some bumps on the stone path, left behind by the king's stoneworms wriggling. It was as if nothing here was an obstacle. As long as it wanted to go, it could go anywhere it wanted. If a king beast like this ran towards the flaming river trading point, could the Yinjiao really stop it? Would the trading point that they had worked so hard to build be destroyed? But Wu thought about it again. He was just here to have fun. Who cared how the Yinjiao fought? He just needed to watch from the side. Now that he thought about it, he was looking forward to the battle between the flaming horns and the Beast King. However, the King Beast did not seem to want to go to the flaming river trading point immediately. Instead, it wriggled around in circles. Occasionally, it would raise its upper body and spit out a cloud of dust. We looked at the ground again. It had flattened a large part of the forest. As the King Beast wriggled around, the petrified forest continued to expand. Well, he could see the greenery turning into stone at a speed visible to the naked eye. Seeing the King Beast turn the forest into stone, Woohee couldn't help but shiver. The rhythm of the long-winged bird's wings also became chaotic. What is it doing? Woohee could not understand the King Beast's actions. The long-winged bird chirped anxiously again. It was not loud, as if it was afraid others would hear it. It wanted to leave this uncomfortable place as soon as possible. Wait, let me take a look. Woohee was really curious now. The King Beast must have a purpose for appearing here, right? Was it looking for food or something else? Woohee scanned the gray-white petrified area. In the flattened forest, there was a small hill protruding from the ground. There was a large hole in the middle of the hill. The King Beast must have come out from there. It came from underground. No wonder it appeared so suddenly. Just as Woohee was talking to himself, he suddenly saw 3 people running out of the pitch-black hole at the top of the short mountain. Yes, they were definitely humans. Even if he was a little far away, with Woohyee's eyesight, even if he couldn't see the other party's appearance clearly, he was still certain that the 3 people who jumped out of the hole were indeed people. Who was so brave to come out of the King Beast hole? Thinking about how he didn't even want to get close to them, Woohee concluded they're really fierce warriors. Even though the King Beast was quite a distance away from the hill, it was the first time Woohee had seen someone brave enough to come so close. The 3 people who jumped out of the hole ran away like the wind. They did not even look at the King Beetle. The person in the lead paused for a moment. At the same time, the wriggling King Beetle stood up and looked in the direction of the 3 people. But that was all there was to it. After that, the Beast King went back to the ground and wriggled around the area. The rumbling noise was deafening in the forest. As for the 3 of them, it was inevitable that there would be some changes in their appearance when they were escaping. The reason why Woohee couldn't see their appearances clearly was because most of their bodies were covered in a layer of grayish-white stone powder. Were these changes caused by the King Beast? They're really brave, Woohee said again. If they ran a little slower and the King Beast was a little closer to the hole, the 3 people might not have been able to escape so easily. The petrification of their bodies would have severely restricted their movements. Follow them. Woohee patted the long-winged bird and said, "Caw." The long-winged bird chirped happily. It could finally leave this place. Woohee looked at the 3 people who jumped out of the hole and ran out of the petrified forest. After running for some distance, they turned around and ran in another direction. That was the direction of the flaming river trading point. While following the trio, the leader looked up at the sky. Woohee knew that he had been discovered, but he didn't feel guilty at all. Instead, he smiled. He didn't know if the other party could see him. In any case, it was useless even if they knew that he was following them. Who asked him to be in the sky? This feeling of looking down on the ground from above, this feeling of greeting their ancestors, this feeling of not being able to touch a single hair on his body. This was F** King awesome. Well, he ordered the long-winged bird to fly lower. He wanted to greet the 3 people who had just escaped from the King Beast. But before he could say anything, the person in the lead put a finger in his mouth and whistled. Well, he raised an eyebrow. What was the meaning of this? Calling for reinforcements? I'm not afraid. Before he could finish his sentence, the long-winged bird screeched and turned to leave. Its sudden reaction almost threw Woohee off. Hey, what's wrong with you? You're not listening. Wrong direction. Woohee wanted the long-winged bird to continue following the 3 people, but he sensed something and turned to look at the sky. An eagle that was twice the size of the long-winged bird was flying towards them from a higher altitude. F***CK. Run, run, Woohee urged. Thinking back to the news he heard, Woohee looked at the eagle that was chasing them. Was that the Yinjiao's giant mountain eagle? Did that mean the 3 people below were from the Flaming Horn tribe? Chapter 681. When Xiao Xian and the other two returned to the Flaming River trading point, it was already empty. Those who wanted to escape had already left. Those who didn't want to leave had been brought to a corner by the Yinjiao people. The patrols who were counting the people in the trading point almost attacked Xiao Xian and the other two as thieves. Grand Elder and the others are back. Kuan Tu shouted excitedly as he ran towards the Flaming River Castle. Duo Kong heaved a sigh of relief when he heard that Xiao Xian was back. No matter what happened next, with Xiao Xian around, he would feel more at ease. However, when they saw the state of Xiao Xian and the other two, Duo Kong and Zheng Luo were shocked. "How did you end up like this?" Zheng Luo asked hurriedly. "Don't mention it. It's all because of that king's stoneworm." Tower slumped in his chair, exhausted. He took a few gulps of water from the person beside him. This was the first time he was so close to a king beast. As expected, the fearsome beasts he hunted in the grassland, even the most troublesome ones, paled in comparison to a king beast. They were on a completely different level. The three of them were covered in grayish-white powder. Not only that, some parts of their bodies and clothes were grayish-white too. However, those parts had already turned to stone. Seeing Tower shake off a layer of hard stone on his arm, Duo Kong and the others' hearts skipped a beat. There was already a piece of flesh on Ta Shou's forearm that had turned into stone. Fortunately, the area that was petrified was not too deep, and the injury was not too serious. However, when they saw that piece of flesh that was dripping with blood after shaking off the stone fragments, everyone present felt uneasy. If even the team leader couldn't avoid this kind of injury, how long could they last? Among Xiao Xian and the other two, Tower's injury was the most serious. While Tower was applying medicine, Ao also told everyone about the process of their chase and the conclusions and guesses they had made. Not long after they crossed the Flaming River, they sensed the King's Stoneworm's location. The underground tunnel led directly to the surface. However, there was a King's Stoneworm outside the cave. Ta and Ao did not know what to do. Should they retreat or charge out? At that time, Ta and Ao were more inclined to rush out directly, but they were stopped by Xiao Xian. Fortunately, Xian stopped us at that time. Otherwise, if we had rushed out at that time, we might not have been able to return safely. Ao sighed. Because they were not familiar with the King Stoneworm, they did not have a clear understanding of the King Beast. Even though they knew that the King Beast was strong, Ao and Todd thought that they could escape if they tried. They were confident in their speed. Besides, the King Stoneworm was not near the entrance of the cave. At least they could follow its movements. As long as the King Beast did not notice them, they could leave. It was only when Xiao Xian stopped them and found another opportunity to escape that they realized how naive they were. Even if the King's Stoneworm did not pay attention to them, it could still turn them into stone. So that means we can't even get close to the King's Stoneworm. Zheng Luo frowned. If they couldn't even get close, how could they fight? Were they going to be turned into stone like the forest? Don't move first. I'll rest for a while before we go take a look, Xiao Xian said. Since Xiao Xian had spoken, the others did not object. Gigu even told Xiao Xian about the original plan. Xian, you said that as long as we are there, the fire seed will be there. There are quite a few Yinjiao people in the trading point now. If we all work together, the fire seed's aura will be quite strong. Do you think it will be enough to deter the King Stoneworm? Gigu asked. Please don't. Xiao Xian did not even bother to drink his water. What? Gigu did not understand what Xiao Xian meant. The others looked at Xiao Xian in confusion. Gigu was right. Wasn't the fire seed just a deterrent to fearsome beasts? Xiao Xian thought for a moment. There's something like a fire seed on the King Stoneworm's body. How is that possible? Everyone gasped. They always thought that fearsome beasts were afraid of fire seeds. King beasts were still beasts. How could they have fire seeds? Even if they did, why didn't they sense it? It does have it, but it's different from a tribesman's fire seed. It's more like a fire seed unique to beasts. I felt it on the bat leader too. The difference was that the fire seed on the bat leader was not as strong as the one on the King Stoneworm, Xiao Xian said. When he saw the bat leader in the 1,000-grain gold field, he already felt something strange. Now that he saw the King Beast, he finally understood what it was. It was a fire seed unique to beasts. Unlike the tribesmen, the fire seed on the beast bodies was unique to them. It did not look like a primitive fire seed either. Instead, it was fused into their blood. Moreover, based on the analysis of the fire seed on the bat leader and the king stoneworm, if Xiao Xian guessed correctly, the fire seed on the king stoneworm's body was formed by the two beasts themselves. Was the king beast's ability to condense fire seeds? Why were king beasts superior to other fearsome beasts? If fire seeds could exist on humans, why couldn't they exist on other beasts? In the past, Xiao Xian had been close to the bat leader and the king stoneworm. He had even fought the Salt King before. But at that time, he did not sense anything different from the three beasts. After bringing Zheng Luo and the others across the sea and fusing with Yin Jiao's fire seed, his strength increased by a lot, especially the light shield around his totemic flames. It was another special power that existed in Xiao Xian's body. He was getting better at using it. Xiao Xian also knew that the reason why he was not strongly rejected by other tribes' fire seeds and could sense things that others could not was because of the special power within him. He didn't know what that power was, but what he sensed was real. There was indeed a fire seed in the king stoneworm's body. It was a fire seed that belonged to beasts. Fire seeds could disperse and gather. Only fearsome beasts that could condense fire seeds could become kings. The fire seed in the bat leader's body was not obvious. It was just a trend. At most, it could only be considered a half-king. It was above fearsome beasts and below king beasts. If it could condense the fire seed in its body one day, it would become a true king. Ao and the others did not know why Xiao Xian said this, but Xiao Xian did not look like he was joking. In this aspect, they also believed that Xiao Xian would not speak without any evidence. If there really is a fire seed in the king stoneworm's body, won't we anger it if we release our fire seed energy? Duo Kong asked. Fire seeds usually repelled each other, so it was definitely not a good idea to anger the king beetle because of this. But if the king stoneworm comes towards us, we can only fight it, Duo Kong was worried. It was not a question of whether they should avoid it or not. They had no choice. I'll go take a look first. Xiao Xian had recovered. He did not shake off the layer of stone powder on his body. Instead, he left the trading point and headed towards the king stoneworm. Zheng Luo and Gigu followed closely behind Xiao Xian. One reason was to help Xiao Xian if necessary. The other reason was to see what the king stoneworm looked like. Xiao Xian approached the king stoneworm. He did not tell them everything in the trading point. When he sensed the strange fire seed energy in the king stoneworm, he also sensed the king stoneworm's mentality. Just like the totemic flame in Xiao Xian's mind, it would change according to the warrior's mentality and emotions. The king stoneworm did not have a totemic flame, but it had a similar fire seed energy. As the energy fluctuated, the king stoneworm expressed its thoughts and emotions. If it were anyone else, even if they sensed the fire seed energy in the king stoneworm, they might not be able to escape unscathed because the fire seed would reject them. However, Xiao Xian's other energy was different. When Xiao Xian left the cave with Ta and Ao, he paused for a moment because he sensed this change. At the same time, he was not repelled by it. In order to leave quietly, the three of them did their best to conceal their totemic power and Yin Jiao's fire seed energy. Although it would slow them down, it was safer. When the king stoneworm stood up, it might not have sensed their energy. Perhaps it was Xiao Xian's other power. This was because Xiao Xian did not feel any rejection from the king stoneworm. On the contrary, the king stoneworm seemed to be excited for a moment. However, after Xiao Xian completely blocked out the power and left, the king stoneworm did not notice it anymore. To verify his guess, Xiao Xian told Zheng Luo and Gigu to stay away while he approached the king stoneworm. He did not stand in the direction of the flaming river trading point. Instead, he hid somewhere else. This way, if the king stoneworm made a move and he escaped, the king stoneworm would not chase him in the direction of the trading point. Xiao Xian stood behind a tree that was still green. He looked towards the source of the rumbling sound. There, the king stoneworm was still wriggling aimlessly. Compared to when Xiao Xian and the rest left, the grayish-white stone forest had expanded. When the king stoneworm had its back to him, Xiao Xian suppressed the totemic power in his body and tried not to release the flaming horn's fire seed energy. At the same time, he tried to activate another type of energy in his body. Xiao Xian discovered this when he was practicing controlling the ancestral bone ornaments. The two powers in his body did not repel each other. It could even be said that this special power was assisting the Yin Jiao's totemic power. Back then, he was able to achieve a different awakening than others. He was able to successfully carve and awaken the ancestral bone ornaments. He was able to absorb fire crystals before fusing with the fire seed. These were all because of this special power. Being able to master this power was a great improvement for himself. Putting away his other emotions, Xiao Xian slowly activated the other power. In his sea of consciousness, the totemic flames did not change much. However, the light shield outside started to brighten. Every time it flashed, it would become brighter by a bit. Gigu and Zheng Luo did not understand what Xiao Xian was doing. They could only see Xiao Xian standing behind a tree. He did not move, and his eyes were closed. They did not know what he was thinking. Why did he close his eyes instead of looking at the king's stoneworm? But soon, they realized that the rumbling in their ears had stopped abruptly. They looked over. In the stone forest, the wriggling king stoneworm's upper body was slightly raised. Its massive body did not have feet, only rings of wrinkles on its body. It did not seem to have any hard armor, nor did it have any intimidating spikes. It did not even seem to have any offensive power. However, such a massive beast was able to make countless people and beasts tremble in fear. They did not even have the courage to fight back. When it turned to look over, Gigu and Zheng Luo did not even see where its eyes were. They did not know how it saw. It only raised its upper body slightly. Its head was already taller than the tallest tree in the forest. In the distant sky, the long-winged bird that had finally escaped Cha-Cha's pursuit stopped. We looked over at the king's stoneworm. Even though he could not see it clearly, he could still see the silhouette beyond the forest. What's going on? We did not understand. Why did the king's stoneworm suddenly stop? It even looked around. His heart was itching again. We looked around and did not see the eagle again. He patted the long-winged bird. Let's go. Coo! The long-winged bird cooed softly, obviously unwilling. They had just escaped, and now they had to go back. The eagle was still around. It would be killed. Let's go. Be careful. Something must have happened. Wui's instincts told him that something was wrong. Could it be that the king beast was finally heading towards Yin Jiao? Thinking about it this way, Wu was even more unwilling to miss this good show. No matter how unwilling the long-winged bird was, it would not disobey its master's orders. It could only slowly and carefully fly over. In the stone forest, the king's stoneworm turned its round head and scanned its surroundings. Finally, it confirmed Xiao Xian's location. Rumble, the sound of its enormous body crashing into the stone forest, rang out again. This time, it was more urgent than before. The king's stoneworm moved even faster. Gigu and Zheng Luo, who were hiding in the dark, saw the king's stoneworm moving toward Xiao Xian. They were anxious and even whistled a few times to warn him. Xiao Xian did not open his eyes, but raised a hand to signal to Gigu and Zheng Luo. He knew that the king's stoneworm was coming his way. The grayish-white was expanding toward Xiao Xian. When the grayish-white approached, Xiao Xian moved too. He did not run towards the flaming river trading point. Instead, he ran in the opposite direction. That way, even if something happened, it would not affect the trading point. As Xiao Xian left, the king's stoneworm followed. It sped up again. Although it was huge and surrounded by trees and rocks, nothing could stop it. Xiao Xian had to avoid obstacles when he ran, but the king's stoneworm ran in a straight line. Rocks blocked rocks and crushed trees. What is he trying to do? Well, he was confused when he saw what was happening below. He could recognize that the person running in front of the king's stoneworm was the one who summoned the giant mountain eagle. He was a Yinjiao tribesman. What he did not understand was that the Yinjiao tribesman had clearly left. Why did he come back? And why was the king's stoneworm following him? Was he trying to lure the king stoneworm away? Chapter 682. It was naturally a good idea to draw the trouble away instead of confronting it head-on. However, the prerequisite was that the trouble had to be really far away from here. Using one person as bait to lure the king beast away while the rest stayed put. Could it be that Yin Jiao wanted to sacrifice one person to protect the rest? Wu He guessed as he watched the situation below. At the same time, Xiao Xian, who was circling the forest, had no time to pay attention to anything else. He was only focused on the king's stoneworm behind him. He circled the forest, and the king's stoneworm followed him. However, it was only heading in Xiao Xian's direction. Even if there was a mountain in front of it, it would not go around it. It would go straight through it. Wherever the king's stoneworm walked, it left behind a stone path with obvious wrinkles on the ground. The trees around the stone path all turned gray, and the caves it passed through left behind a straight tunnel. Just like how the king's stoneworm could move freely in its nest, here, the mountain rocks were as easy as a wild beast stepping on the grass. Moreover, when it passed through the entire mountain, the sound it made when it moved through the mountain was much quieter than when it moved on the ground. Xiao Xian had been paying attention to the fire seed energy emitted by the king's stoneworm, as well as the fire seed energy waves on its body. This allowed him to guess the king's stoneworm's emotions. He realized that the king's stoneworm's emotions were not very strong. It could even be said that it was monotonous. Other than happiness and excitement, he could not sense anything else. Xiao Xian did not know if it was because his ability was limited or because the king's stoneworm's emotions were not rich to begin with. He believed the latter. If the king's stoneworm's emotions were not rich, it would not be a good thing. In that case, Xiao Xian would not be able to sense clearly what it wanted to do, and what its goal was. Xiao Xian could only try and guess. Fortunately, at least until now, the king's stoneworm had not shown any hostility to Xiao Xian. In fact, there was even a hint of friendliness in its happiness. This did not mean that the king's stoneworm would not attack Xiao Xian, but it might treat Xiao Xian as one of its own, just like how the bat leader treated Xiao Xian as one of its own. The difference was that the bat leader didn't attack Xiao Xian, but the king's stoneworm didn't know how to control its power. If the distance between Xiao Xian and the king's stoneworm got closer, Xiao Xian's fate would be obvious. He would be turned into a stone forest. Zheng Luo and Gigu saw this, and guessed that Xiao Xian wanted to lure the king's stoneworm away. But how far did he have to lure it away? How was Xiao Xian going to get rid of the king's stoneworm? There's still Cha-Cha. Gigu looked up at the sky. Seeing that Cha-Cha was following them, he felt relieved. That's good. Zheng Luo was relieved. As long as the king's stoneworm was lured away, Cha-Cha could bring Xiao Xian back. The king's stoneworm couldn't fly anyway, so what if it was powerful? After thinking it through, Guei first took out a strip of cloth and wrote a few simple words on the cloth with a bamboo tube of paint that he carried with him. Then he called the snow-white falcon over and had it bring the cloth to the trading point. A white figure flew out from the forest with a piece of cloth tied to its leg. It flew straight towards the trading point without looking at the long-winged bird in the sky. Duo Kong and the others were waiting anxiously at the trading point. They didn't see Xiao Xian and the rest for a long time, nor did they see any signs of the king beast. They could only walk around in circles, not in the mood to sit down and wait. Finally, seeing the white falcon flying over, Ao, who was lying down and resting, got up and untied the cloth tied to the falcon's leg. What did it say? Duo Kong and Ta hurried over. Gigu wrote it. He said that Xian has lured the king beast away. Ao said. Lured away? Duo Kong was confused. Was a king beast that easy to lure away? If it was that easy, why were they so afraid of the king beast? Back at the salt flats, the salt beast acted based on its own preferences and emotions. It didn't care about anything else. The king's stoneworm shouldn't have been that easy to lure away either. But since it was Xiao Xian who did it, it was possible. It's a good thing if it's lured away, Ta said. He didn't want to fight the king's stoneworm because he knew what it was capable of. Without absolute power, fighting a king beast will be a waste of their tribe's manpower. The result might not even be satisfactory. Soon, The news that Yin Jiao's Grand Elder had lured the king beast away spread throughout the trading point. Of course, there weren't many people in the trading point. They were all gathered in a few places, so it was reasonable that the news spread quickly. They lured the king beast away. The Yin Jiao people were jubilant. On the other hand, the people who stayed were disappointed. They were prepared to die. They were just talking nonsense with the Yin Jiao people, saying that if the king beast returned, they would help. But now they couldn't see it? What was the point of staying? Their lives were bleak. No, I have to leave. Someone suddenly rushed out of the crowd. The patrol team, who had relaxed after hearing the good news, didn't pay attention and let the person rush out. Even though the 3 main gates of the trading point were closed, the outer walls of the trading point couldn't stop people who were good at climbing and jumping. The patrol team couldn't leave just because of one person. They couldn't just leave like that. Even though the news from the Flaming River Castle said that the Grand Elder had lured the king beast away, they didn't have any other orders, so they couldn't just leave like that. Other than that person, a few more people left. The rest wanted to leave too. They wanted to see the king beast, but they were beaten up. At a time like this, the Flaming Horns did not want to cause more trouble because of these few people. Duo Kong also frowned when he heard the news. He was also worried that the people who ran out would interfere with Xiao Xian's plan. So, he led a team to chase after them. If they interfered with Xiao Xian's plan to lure the king beast away, they would be killed immediately. Master, did the king beast really leave? Grasshopper looked anxiously in one direction and asked carefully, if he really lured the king beast far away, wouldn't you feel it? Not yet. EC looked at the spikes on Grasshopper's back that ran along her spine. When Grasshopper was scared, the spikes on his back would stick out. Although he had retracted them a little, the spikes on his spine were still standing straight. Qing Fu's brain wasn't very bright, but the beast blood flowing in his body made him more sensitive to danger. Even if his brain didn't realize it, the instinct of a beast that was deeply embedded in his bones existed like a conditioned reflex. Grasshopper touched the spikes on his back and responded slowly. Oh, others might only be afraid of the king beast, but he was terrified of its aura. He almost peed his pants. On the other side, Xiao Xian did plan to lure the king's stoneworm away. The fact that the king's stoneworm was following behind him confirmed some of his guesses. But where was he going to lure the king's stoneworm now? Leading upstream? Or should it be directed downstream? Or central? If he lured it to central, he would probably make Yin Jiao hate him. After all, many people knew about this, and it wasn't wise to hide it. Logically speaking, it was best to lure it to a place with fewer people. There weren't as many tribes upstream as there were downstream. The Rain tribe was just a little upstream from Yin Jiao. If he lured it upstream, he would have to avoid the Rain tribe and the other tribes that Xiao Xian knew lived upstream. If it was just the Rain tribe and the other tribes, it would be easy. As he was thinking, Xiao Xian saw a river in front of him. This river was a branch of the Flaming River. It wasn't very big. During the driest times, he could see 2 large green rocks on the riverbed. But now, there was still a lot of water, and the rocks were nowhere to be seen. Xiao Xian wanted to walk along the river, but after thinking about it, he gave up. Instead, he kicked down a tree that was as thick as 3 people and threw the trunk into the river. He gathered strength in his legs, and his body shot out. When he landed on the surface of the water, he stepped on the tree trunk again and jumped to the other side of the river. This river wasn't very wide in this area. The riverbed was only about 10 meters wide. With Xiao Xian's ability and the help of the tree trunk, he could easily cross it. But the king's stoneworm behind him couldn't do the same. Xiao Xian knew that it could easily crush rocks and trees, but what about the river? Should he cross it directly or burrow under the riverbed? After running for a while, Xiao Xian turned around and looked behind him. The king's stoneworm had followed him to the riverside and stopped. It looked at the water, then raised its head slightly to look at Xiao Xian. It was probably thinking about how to cross the river. Xiao Xian didn't sense any big changes in the king's stoneworm's emotions. Perhaps this little problem was nothing to it. Just as Xiao Xian was guessing how it was going to cross the river, the king's stoneworm moved. It didn't burrow into the ground, but continued to walk towards Xiao Xian as if the river didn't exist. Crack, crack, crack. The sound of water freezing could be heard. Xiao Xian saw that as the king's stoneworm approached, the water in the river froze, as if it was frozen, spreading outwards from where it was closest to the king's stoneworm. What was different from the frozen river was that the water in that area was the same as the forest, turning into a grayish-white color. The water had turned into stone. Without changing its wriggling posture, the king's stoneworm continued to walk as if it was walking on flat ground. However, under the king's stoneworm's body, as it moved forward, a stone path was laid out on the surface of the water. It was like a moving train with a track laid out in front of it. It only needed to keep moving forward. Taking a deep breath, Xiao Xian looked at the king's stoneworm that was about to cross the river. He turned around and continued running. This time, he made a U-turn and returned to the riverside. Then, using the same method, he jumped over the river with the help of the tree trunk. The king's stoneworm behind him also used the same method to cross the river, forming a stone path on the river surface. An idea suddenly popped into Xiao Xian's head. Thus, the group of people who were chasing after the king stared at Xiao Xian, who was originally running away from the flaming river, returning with the king beast. Chapter 683. What's going on? Why is he back again? What are they trying to do? The people who had come to see the king beast felt that it was better to turn around and run after seeing it. No one dared to go any closer. Even if they weren't in danger yet, they could feel the oppressive aura that made them tremble in fear. The petrified forest they saw along the way had really shocked them. Just one look was enough. They just wanted to keep a safe distance from the king beast. That was why when they saw the Yinjiao Grand Elder, who was said to have lured the king beast away, running back, they didn't have time to think and quickly ran away. As Xiao Xian ran back, he called Gigu over and said a few words to him. Then, he led the king beast in a circle, giving Gigu time to inform the people at the Flaming River Castle. Because Xiao Xian and Gigu were far away, the others didn't know what they were talking about or what they wanted to do. They only saw Xiao Xian running away with the king beast while Gigu ran back to the Flaming River Castle. Xiao Xian asked Gigu to inform the people at the Flaming River Castle that he was running with the king beast towards the Flaming River. They might be close to the Flaming River Castle for a while, so they should be prepared. They shouldn't release their fire seeds, aura, and try to hide it as much as possible. That way, the king beast wouldn't notice them. If the king beast didn't follow Xiao Xian and ran towards the Flaming River Castle, they should evacuate first. The Flaming River Castle could be rebuilt if it was destroyed, but it wasn't wise to fight the king beast. Moreover, Xiao Xian had been running with the king's stoneworm for a long time. He had some understanding of the king's stoneworm's strength. Although it wasn't complete, he was sure that this king's stoneworm wasn't any weaker than the salt beast he saw on the other side of the sea. If the two were to fight together, the salt beast would be at a disadvantage. Even if Xiao Xian lured this giant beast away now, it wouldn't be a long-term solution. No one could guarantee when it would come back. The best way to solve the problem was to bring it back to its nest. According to Xiao Xian's guess, this king's stoneworm had no sense of direction and couldn't find its way back. However, if things weren't as he thought and the king's stoneworm didn't want to go back to its nest, then luring it to the forest filled with fearsome beasts was a good solution. It was better than leaving it at the Flaming River. After all, there were many tribes here and no one had the confidence to kill it directly. Hoping that several tribes would work together to fight the king's stoneworm, he was afraid that not only would that not happen, but it would also make everyone blame the Flaming Horns tribe. Since the king's stoneworm wasn't afraid of water, why not lure it to where it should stay? This was the conclusion Xiao Xian came to after careful consideration. Gigu conveyed Xiao Xian's message to the trading point. At the same time, he had the Snow Falcon bring a letter back to the headquarters. Both sides had to be prepared, just in case. Against the king beast, they had to be more prepared. After Xiao Xian led the king's stoneworm in a few circles, he looked up and saw Gigu's Snow Falcon flying across the sky. He knew that the other side was ready, so he turned around and headed towards the Flaming River. The king's stoneworm was also in a daze. Xiao Xian was obviously leading it in circles, and it kept following him in circles without much emotion. If this happened to the salt beast, it would have gone mad. That was to say, not all beast kings were the same in terms of intelligence. But everything had to be balanced. If a king beast didn't have a high IQ, then it must have a high innate talent. Just like EC's half-beast human slave, who didn't have a high IQ, he used his innate talent to make up for it. There was a reason why he was able to intimidate others. It was undeniable that this king's stoneworm was freakishly strong. If it was left unchecked, it would definitely stir up chaos in every part of the continent. Inside the Flaming River Castle, after Gigu's announcement, Yinjiao's team leaders gathered and told them what to do next. Sensing the changes in Yinjiao's team, EC was puzzled. Even if he could calculate the probability of something happening based on many details and predict what would happen next, he had too little information. Even if he knew that Yinjiao had a plan, he couldn't figure out what it was. Just as he was thinking, EC suddenly heard a gurgling sound. He turned around and saw a grasshopper curled up into a ball. The gurgling sound came from his teeth chattering. EC looked at his back. Originally, only his spine still had thorns, but now several thorns were popping out. The thorns that had been retracted before were all coming out now. That was a clear indication of the Beast King's whereabouts. Didn't they lure the king beast away? Why was it approaching again? Grasshopper wasn't the only one who sensed the king beast's approach. The others in the Flaming River Castle also sensed the king beast's presence. What's wrong? Is the king beast here? The people who weren't allowed to leave looked forward expectantly. They felt that the houses in front of them were an eyesore, so they jumped to the roof of the tallest house around them. From there, they could see beyond the outer walls of the trading point. However, there was a forest outside the trading point. So, in the end, they set their sights on one of the towers on both sides of the trading point's main entrance. Yinjiao's team just wanted these restless people to calm down. At the same time, they were also curious. Ta, who had already rested, led a team to the tower near the main entrance and looked forward. There were 3 main entrances to the trading point. Only this entrance faced the direction that Xiao Xian planned to go through. Rumble, Ta's expression changed. It's here. He knew that it was the sound of the king, stoneworm wriggling. Although the sound was still far away, he couldn't help but tense up. He was so nervous that his forehead started to sweat. When he came into close contact with the king's stoneworm, the feeling of petrification that even his totemic power couldn't resist, the helplessness of defeat, was still fresh in his mind. There was no way he could relax. With Ta's reminder, the others also became nervous. Even the people from the other tribes who had been clamoring to see the king beast were now silent. They stared unblinkingly in that direction, their fists clenched tightly. Their palms were sweaty. They heard the sound too. Just because they wanted to see the king beast didn't mean that they weren't afraid. Even if they were fearless before, they couldn't help but feel nervous now. The air seemed to be filled with the smell of stone powder. The forest was silent, as if all the creatures living in it had been strangled. The rumbling sound was getting closer and closer. Whether it was the people standing on the tower or the people standing on top of the Flaming River Castle, they could all see a gray-white line approaching from the forest in the distance. It was heading towards the Flaming River. "Is that the king beast?" someone asked in a low voice. Even without the Yinjiao people's reminder, they didn't dare to make any noise. Even if they were still far away, they subconsciously lowered their voices as soon as they spoke. That's where the king's stone worm is. Wherever it goes, everything will turn to stone, whether it's trees or people. Everything will turn to stone. Ta's tone was calm, but if you saw the expression in his eyes, you would know that he was looking in that direction with fear and caution. Hearing this, everyone sucked in a deep breath. Even if they weren't there, they could imagine what the Yinjiao people were talking about. Someone gulped and stammered, It's really powerful. Of course, a king beast. How can it not be powerful?" The person next to him tried his best to put on a calm face, but his true feelings were exposed as soon as he spoke. As someone who rarely even saw fearsome beasts, one could imagine how shocked he was when he saw a king beast. But soon, everyone's attention shifted from the king beast to the Yinjiao people's goal. "Didn't you say that you've lured it away? Why did you lure it back?" EC asked. He was the calmest person among the non-Yinjiao people. Ta glanced at him. We have our reasons for doing this. He didn't want to say more. In fact, he wasn't sure either. Xiao Xian's plan was crazy. He wouldn't have thought of it even if he was beaten to death. But after thinking about it, it really was the best plan. Let's wait and see, Ta said dryly and didn't say anything else. Who was in a mood to talk now? Even though the king beast wasn't heading in their direction, it wasn't too far from the flaming river trading point. Everyone could even see the green forest turning into a grayish-white petrified forest. Those who didn't have a clear understanding of beast kings felt their knees go weak and cold sweat trickled down their backs. They opened their mouths several times, wanting to say something, but no words would come out. They could only stare at the beast kings with their eyes wide open. The muscles on their faces twitched, giving them a ferocious look. Rumble. The wriggling sound of the king's stoneworm was like thunder in everyone's hearts, again and again. Unknowingly, everyone in the trading point started breathing cautiously. They couldn't see Xiao Xian leading the king's stoneworm. They couldn't even see the king's stoneworm's figure in the petrified forest. But the grayish-white expanding in their field of vision left a deep impression on them. This was a king beast. Those who were clamoring to fight a king beast now felt that they were so naive and stupid. But no one mocked him at a time like this. Everyone's eyes followed the expanding grayish-white until the rumbling in their ears weakened. The king's stoneworm was already in front of them, heading towards the flaming river. Only then did they come back to their senses. You all stay here. I'll go take a look. Ta jumped down from the tower and ran towards the flaming river. The trading point was safe for now. He wanted to go take a look. Chapter 684. Other than the people at the flaming river trading point, some of the people who were supposed to leave were also paying attention to the king's stoneworm. Among the first batch of people to leave, how many of them actually wanted to leave instead of hiding in the dark and waiting for an opportunity to rob the trading point? The Yinjiao people had a lot of good stuff, and they were jealous. Usually, they were afraid of the Yinjiao people's strength, so they didn't dare to make a move. But now, wasn't this the perfect opportunity? If they didn't make good use of this opportunity, they would be letting themselves down. Although it was dangerous, it was necessary to take risks if they wanted to reap greater rewards. However, they didn't expect things to develop so differently from what they had expected. Until now, they still hadn't made a move. Even the teams that were far away from the flaming river trading point still sent people to keep an eye on the movements around the trading point. Hence, although they were slower to find out what was going on around the trading point and the flaming river, they still had a rough idea. At this moment, Xiao Xian didn't have time to care about other people's feelings. He only had his eyes on the king's stoneworm behind him to make sure it was still following him. After passing through the forest, the flaming river was just ahead. Perhaps they had sensed the king beast's presence. The piranhas that used to be active in the river were all avoiding them. Without stopping, Xiao Xian took a deep breath and whistled. Cha-Cha, who had been following him in the air, flapped its wings and dived down. Xiao Xian grabbed Cha-Cha's claw with one hand and was brought to the top of the flaming river. This was the most important part of the plan. The King Stoneworm's actions were the key to their success. In the forest, Gigu and the rest were getting more and more nervous. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly as they prayed in their hearts. Ancestors, please protect us. This was not the small river from before. The flaming river was a few hundred meters wide and close to 1,000 meters wide. How was the King Stoneworm going to cross such a huge river? Actually, according to Xiao Xian's plan, there was an ideal situation and a less ideal one. Of course, even if things didn't go as planned, as long as the King Stoneworm could cross the river, it would be good enough. The method of crossing the river was secondary. Their safety was more important. Did he come directly from the bottom of the river? Or should they go deeper into the river? Or, Xiao Xian grabbed Cha-Cha's claw and looked at the King Stoneworm that had stopped at the shore. Come here quickly. Head this way. Xiao Xian shouted in his heart. In the sea of consciousness, the light shield that enveloped Yinjiao's totem flames grew brighter and brighter. The King Stoneworm that had stopped by the shore lifted its upper body, as if it wanted to see what was in front of it clearly. Those who were hiding in the forest could see the king stoneworm's head clearly. Only half of its body was visible, but it was already taller than the tallest tree in the area. No one could ignore it. To the king stoneworm, when everything around it was unfamiliar, it would naturally choose to follow a fire seed source that was close to it. However, the river in front of it made it pause for a moment. However, it only paused for a moment. As the river surface closest to it turned grayish-white, the front half of its body that had been raised up lay down again. On the surface of the river, where the front half of the king stoneworm's body touched, the river water had turned into a grayish-white stone ground. Even the ripples on the water were very clear, retaining the shape they had when they were blown by the wind. However, as the king stoneworm wriggled forward, the ripples no longer remained. Instead, they were replaced by the signature marks of the king stoneworm. Crack, crack, crack. The petrified water surface was still spreading rapidly. The king stoneworm was like a petrified projectile. The water around it had turned into stone. However, compared to the large-scale petrification in the forest, the petrification on the water surface was more concentrated. It was only under the king stoneworm's body and the areas around it. At this moment, the king stoneworm's entire body was above the flaming river. Xiao Xian took a deep breath. He was excited. Things were going according to his plan. It was the most perfect route. The king stoneworm did not sink to the bottom of the river. It did not burrow underground. Instead, it continued to travel on the river. Nothing could stop it. Nothing. Even if it was a river that was hundreds of thousands of meters wide. Something that people thought was impossible was happening because of the wriggling of the Beast King. This was the power of a king stoneworm. It was worthy of the title king. As the king stoneworm continued to move forward, Xiao Xian had Cha-Cha bring him to the other side of the river. They controlled their speed and direction. They did not deviate from the route, nor did they go too far or too close. They maintained the most suitable position and flew forward. This was only the beginning. A long, straight bridge appeared in front of everyone's eyes. As the enormous body moved forward, it gradually extended forward. In the air, Wu He, who had been watching the scene, was so shocked that he almost fell off his long-winged bird. So that was it. To think that he actually had such a plan. They were using a king stoneworm as a laborer. How did they think of this? What a bunch of lunatics. He wasn't the only one who was stunned. The people from the other tribes were also stunned. Even Duo Kong and the others who were leading the team to help were stunned. They wanted to rub their eyes and pat their heads to see if they were hallucinating because they were too nervous and tired. Although they knew what Xiao Xian was planning, they did not expect this to happen. As the king stoneworm wriggled, a stone bridge that extended from one side of the river to the other appeared above the vast flaming river. It could even turn water into stone. At the same time, some people were wondering how such a cumbersome king stoneworm could travel on the water as if it was flat ground. Even if it could turn water into stone, the stone it formed might not be able to support its heavy body. Could it be that the stone had reached the bottom of the river and was forming a stone bridge that cut off the flaming river? No, that was impossible. The flaming river looked very deep. How could it be cut off so easily? The water did not look like it was cut off either. Then, was this bridge floating on the water? Otherwise, how could it support such a huge king stoneworm? But how could a stone float on the water? It went against common sense, and no one could understand it no matter how hard they thought about it. While they were shocked by the scene on the river, they were also confused to the point of going crazy. Unimaginable. They thought that the Yinjiao people would lure the king stoneworm to another place because of its threat, but they were surprised to find that they had lured the king stoneworm back to the flaming river. Only now did they understand what the flaming horns were planning to do. The flaming horns were truly unfathomable. If the Yinjiao people knew what the others were thinking about them, they would cry out that it was all the First Elder's idea. They were just carrying it out. They were just as shocked as the others. On the roof of the flaming river tower, Ao and a group of Yinjiao people were observing the king stoneworm's movements. However, as Xiao Xian lured the king stoneworm away, they could not see that far no matter how good their eyesight was. On the other side, A.O. Zheng was using a telescope to observe the movements above the flaming river. From time to time, he would exclaim, "How can this be? How can this be?" So this was Ah Xian's plan. The others scratched their ears and cheeks when they heard this. They stopped looking at flaming river and stared fixedly at A.O. They thought, "Elder A.O., why don't you say something and let us know what's going on over there? Why don't you show us the telescope?" Something unexpected must have happened for the former chief to be so shocked. It must have been far beyond everyone's imagination. Something strange must have happened. They wanted to rush over to the flaming river castle to see what was going on, but they had to stay here. After all, the trading point, especially the flaming river castle, had to be guarded to prevent people from taking the opportunity to steal. Unfortunately, A.O. was too engrossed in his stare and did not notice the reactions of the others. He did not have the slightest intention of letting go of the telescope either. The stone walls on both sides of the king's stoneworm were more than 7 meters wide. Including the king's stoneworm's body, the stone bridge was more than 20 meters wide on average. If they wanted to build a long bridge over such a wide river, it would not be easy even if they had more advanced technology, let alone the current technology. But now, a long stone bridge without any piers was gradually taking shape. Not only that, the king's stoneworm was wriggling steadily across the river without any change in speed. Very good. This risk was worth it. Xiao Xian looked at the long gray-white bridge that spanned across the river. He suppressed his excitement, and he urged to immediately test the sturdiness of this stone bridge. He let out a long sigh. There was no rush. It would not be too late to go back and test it after everything was over. Xiao Xian had made a few preparations. Now, things were progressing smoothly according to his expectations. It was the most perfect route. It was even better than what he had expected. Even Xiao Xian himself had underestimated this king stoneworm. Although it was a little slow, there was no doubt about the king stoneworm's valiant ability. 1/5, 1/3, 1/2, 2/3, this miraculous stone bridge was about to be completed. The people who were staring at the river stared until their eyes were dry. They could not bear to blink, afraid that they would miss an important moment. They were very glad that they had come along to witness the birth of such a miracle. The wind picked up and became stronger. It blew down from the upper reaches of the flaming river, causing waves to crash against the stone bridge behind the king's stoneworm. Boom! The waves splashed into splashes. However, no matter how hard the waves crashed, the stone bridge that looked like it was floating on the water did not move at all. It was as if it was proving to the world that it was sturdy. Chapter 685. Yanjiao's people were also paying attention to the situation. Many of the patrols were hiding nearby. According to Gigu's message, they had to maintain a safe distance from the king's stoneworm. If they got too close, there was a risk of being petrified. Everyone breathed softly and tried their best to hide their presence. Before they received orders, they only needed to stay here and watch. They were not allowed to make any moves or expose themselves too early. They would wait and see. On the other side, Xiao Xian had already been brought to the riverbank by Cha-Cha. After landing, he saw the king's stoneworm following closely behind him. He didn't stay for long and ran towards the forest. The king's stoneworm finally reached the riverbank. It paused for a moment, then started to follow Xiao Xian again. The long bridge that crossed the flaming river extended all the way to the riverbank and connected with the king's stoneworm's wriggling trail. A large area of the riverbank had turned gray. After reaching the riverbank, the king's stoneworm returned to its original state. It rumbled again. It didn't look back at the long bridge behind it. It didn't care about its shocking actions. Perhaps it wasn't anything special to it. It just continued to follow Xiao Xian. The Yanjiao patrols hiding in the forest watched the king's stoneworm leave with Xiao Xian. After they were far away, they let out a long sigh. They were also shocked by what they saw on the river. It left. Yes, it left with the first elder. It probably won't turn back. What's that on the river? What did the king's stoneworm make? That should be called a bridge? I heard the first elder mention it before, but he said that his abilities were limited, so he couldn't build it, someone said. So the bridge is built now? Is that it? Another person pointed at the gray bridge on the flaming river. Should be. Why don't we go take a look? Let's not. We'll wait for the first elder and the others to come back. Wei stopped the person who wanted to go over. Hey, boss, look over there. Someone's coming. The person behind Wei shouted towards the opposite shore. Wei looked over. There were indeed people on the other side of the flaming river who had stepped onto the gray bridge. I think it's Leader Duo Kong. Oh, and Leader Ta. Elder Zheng Luo and Chief are here too. On the other side of the flaming river, Duo Kong brought his men to the side of the newly formed gray bridge. Gigu, Zheng Luo, and Ta, who came from the flaming river trading point, all came to the side of the bridge. Because the King Stoneworm paused here before crossing the river, the area of petrification at this end of the bridge was larger than at other places. Gigu stepped on the petrified grass under his feet. The petrified grass here was slightly harder than the ones in the forest. When he stepped on the petrified grass in the forest, he could still hear cracking sounds. But here, he couldn't break the grass without using some force. Let's go take a look, Zheng Luo suggested. Give it a try. Tower was also looking forward to it. Let's give it a try. As the current leader, Gigu led the way and stepped onto the stone bridge. If the King Stoneworm could walk on it steadily, all of them added together wouldn't be as heavy as the King Stoneworm. Logically speaking, they should be fine too. Gigu, Zheng Luo, Duo Kong, and Ta stepped onto the new bridge. Behind them, Duo King's team of Yinjiao warriors followed. To them, this was a new experience. After Gigu stepped on it, he stepped on it with some force. The hard stone surface under his feet made him feel more at ease. It was very hard and firm. As expected, a place that could withstand the King Stoneworm's weight wouldn't collapse so easily. After the first step, the second and third steps were even faster. They were nervous at the beginning, but after walking for more than 10 meters, their steps became more relaxed. They could walk. They could really walk on water. Those who stepped onto the stone bridge felt the firm ground under their feet and the waves on both sides of the bridge. They took deep breaths. The waves splashed against the stone bridge and splashed onto their bodies. The layer of stone powder that covered their bodies from following the stoneworm was washed away by the water. The stone powder was from the dust caused by the King Stoneworm's movements. It wasn't from the stoneworm's body, so when it was washed away by the water, it mixed together. Everyone who stepped onto the bridge had grayish-white stains on their faces and bodies. They looked very haggard, but at this time, no one cared about that. They just wiped their faces and couldn't help but smile. With a long bridge here, it would be more convenient for Yinjiao. After all, ships weren't everything, and they didn't have as many giant mountain eagles as the Hui tribe. Even if they did, it would still be inconvenient. However, if there was a long bridge that spanned across the two shores, then everything would be much simpler. If they wanted to transport goods between the Flaming River Trading Point and the Flaming Horn headquarters, they could do so at any time, rain or shine. In the future, when they controlled both sides of the Flaming River, even tribesmen who couldn't follow them on the ships could travel between the two sides easily. This bridge connected the two sides of the Flaming River. Yinjiao's group of about 30 people attracted the attention of hundreds of pairs of eyes. Wu He, who was in the sky, and the people from the other tribes who were hiding in the forest behind them, as well as the people from the headquarters on the other side of the bridge, were all staring at their movements. They craned their necks to watch them walk from one end of the bridge to the other side step by step. They really can walk across. A tribesman who was sent by an expedition team to scout the situation stared at the back of the group on the stone bridge. His voice was full of surprise. I want to walk across too, but that's Yinjiao territory. Another person hiding behind a tree stared at Gigu's group. Some of the braver ones came out of the forest and walked to the side of the stone bridge. However, they didn't dare to step on it directly. From their point of view, since the Yinjiao made this place, it definitely belonged to the Yinjiao people. Without the Yinjiao's permission, it would be considered trespassing and provocation if they stepped on it. After the incident with the king beast, they were even more wary of the Yinjiao people, so it was better to be cautious. However, looking at the stone bridge in front of them, their hearts itched unbearably. Someone quickly went over and stepped on it. Then, like the wind, They ran into the forest and hid. It could be considered a personal experience, and they were addicted to it. The others watched the figure disappear into the forest like the wind, then looked at the bridge not far away. They gritted their teeth, took 2 big steps forward, stepped on the bridge, then quickly retreated and ran away. In the sky, Wu He, who was sitting on his long-winged bird, watched the Yinjiao people successfully walk from one end of the bridge to the other. He secretly decided that when he saw the other Changles, he would brag about it. It wasn't easy to witness the birth of such a miracle. Luckily, he was brave enough at the crucial moment. Otherwise, if he left just like that and heard about it from others, he would definitely regret it. Regardless of how the others felt, Xiao Xian continued to lead the king's stoneworm into the forest. The king's stoneworm wouldn't discuss when at rest with Xiao Xian. As long as it continued to follow behind, Xiao Xian couldn't stop. He kept running towards the king's stoneworm's nest. However, the king's stoneworm had probably used up too much energy to cross the river. When it reached the bank, it slowed down quite a bit. To it, wriggling on the ground was more difficult than underground. Stoneworms ate rocks. Xiao Xian wasn't sure what the king's stoneworm ate. Whether it ate rocks, soil, or the unknown stones deep underground, it was all underground. It was used to wriggling underground, so of course it was very uncomfortable on the ground. Therefore, not long after it reached the bank, the king's stoneworm burrowed into the ground. Of course, it still followed Xiao Xian. It didn't burrow into the ground, but kept a distance from the surface. This allowed it to wriggle underground and sense Xiao Xian's presence. It followed closely behind Xiao Xian. Perhaps it had used up a lot of energy to cross the river, and with the 2 days of running, the area of petrification had narrowed. After the king's stoneworm burrowed into the ground, the vegetation on the ground wasn't petrified. However, if a layer of grass was removed, the petrified soil would gradually be revealed. Xiao Xian could sense the king's stoneworm's location. He didn't stop. As he brought the king's stoneworm back into the forest, his plan was almost complete. This was a very good sign. Even if the vegetation on the ground wasn't petrified, the king's stoneworm's aura was still very intimidating to the various beasts in the forest. Sensing the king's stoneworm's approach, the fearsome beasts hurriedly avoided it. This made it much easier for Xiao Xian to move forward. Without any disturbance from the fearsome beasts, Xiao Xian smoothly made his way to his destination. It wasn't a short journey, and when he crossed the river, the sun was already setting. When the sun set and night arrived, Xiao Xian was still some distance away from the king's stoneworm's nest. He had to rush through the night. Fortunately, he had special vision at night, so he could maintain his speed in the forest at night. When a hunting team entered the forest, they would consider the distribution of fearsome beasts and members to decide whether to go in a straight line or take a detour. But now, Xiao Xian was alone, with a king beast following behind him. In this forest that Xiao Xian was familiar with, no fearsome beast would have the mind to attack Xiao Xian when a king beast approached. Therefore, Xiao Xian boldly ran through the shortest distance. The night passed, and when the dark sky began to brighten, Xiao Xian finally saw the tall mountain. Probably sensing a familiar scent, the king's stoneworm behind Xiao Xian suddenly sped up. It was so excited that it couldn't control its strength. A large patch of grayish-white appeared on the ground and expanded rapidly. The king's stoneworm didn't break out of the ground. It was still underground. Not only did it not come out, it even burrowed deeper into the ground. Xiao Xian could sense that the king's stoneworm was far away. The grayish-white patch on the ground stopped expanding. Xiao Xian also concealed his aura. He had done what he needed to do. Roar, roar, squeak. In the mountain ahead, the cries of various beasts could be heard. The beasts that entered the mountain while the king's stoneworm was away were greatly frightened. They scrambled to get out of the cave. The king of the mountain had returned. How could they have the courage to stay in the mountain? Chapter 686. Xiao Xian rested beside the king's stoneworm's nest for about an hour. He hunted a fearsome beast and shared it with the Cha-Cha. Because the king's stoneworm had just returned, all the other fearsome beasts in the area had fled. They wouldn't come near for a while, so Xiaoxian wouldn't have any trouble staying here. Not long after the king's stoneworm entered the mountain, the commotion died down and everything calmed down. The king's stoneworm didn't come out of the mountain again. Xiaoxian could sense that the king's stoneworm was at the bottom of the mountain. It seemed to be in a good mood, too. Although it didn't show much emotion, Xiaoxian could guess that it was happy to come back. Was it really lost? It had no sense of direction and couldn't figure out how to get back to the mountain. All it could do was run in a random direction, but it ended up going further and further away. How stupid. However, its strength was feared by many people and beasts. If Xiaoxian hadn't lured it back, it would probably have caused a lot of trouble in the mainland. It didn't care where you could petrify. It would stop wherever it wanted. With its intelligence, it didn't think too much and didn't have any complicated thoughts. Because of this, no one could predict what it would do if it started to act recklessly. Luckily, it was all over now. The bat leader that was left at the Flaming Horn headquarters should be returning to its nest soon. Xiaoxian's heart burned with excitement when he thought about the bridge that appeared on the Flaming River. That was a bridge that spanned hundreds of thousands of meters. He didn't know what the bridge was like. Could it meet his standards? The more he thought about it, the more restless Xiaoxian became. After eating the fearsome beast meat, he recovered a lot of energy. Looking at the clouds in the sky, Xiaoxian got up to extinguish the fire and clean up the traces. Then he set off. Xiaoxian met Duo Kong and the rest along the way. It turned out that after crossing the long bridge, Duo Kong had brought people to chase after Xiaoxian. He thought that if Xiaoxian needed help, they could help. He didn't expect Xiaoxian to have already settled everything. Has the king's stoneworm gone back? Duo Kong asked. It's gone back. It probably won't come out again unless there's another disaster, Xiaoxian said. That's good. That's great. Duo Kong said a few words in a row. They really didn't want to fight against the king's stoneworm. Also, the king's stoneworm seemed to be more powerful than the salt beast they had seen before. The king's stoneworm was so powerful that it could even turn water into stone. How could they fight against such a beast? Knowing that the beast kings wouldn't pose a threat to the tribe for the time being, everyone felt relieved. Duo Kong told Xiaoxian about what happened on the bridge. We can really walk. We all came from that, bridge. Yes, from that bridge. It's not like a wooden raft that sinks. It's stable. It's like walking on solid ground. Duo Kong looked excited. In his impression, the so-called bridge was mostly just a huge piece of wood, just like the tree trunk they used to cross the artificial river outside the tribe when they were on the other side of the sea. But now he saw a real bridge. Only then did he understand the meaning of the word bridge. So a bridge could look like this. So a bridge could cover such a long distance. This was a shock to his mind. When the disaster happened, the tribe came here from the connected wooden rafts. Xiaoxian had also mentioned the bridge. But at that time, everyone thought differently from Xiaoxian. They didn't think it was necessary and impossible. Now it had really happened. They didn't rely on manpower. They used the King Stoneworm's power to complete it. When he thought about how this bridge belonged to his tribe, Duo Kong couldn't help but feel proud. Just like the other tribes, Duo Kong thought that since Xiaoxian was the reason for the formation of this bridge, it must belong to Yanjiao. He would fight anyone who wanted it. How could there be such a long bridge in the Central Plains? The slave masters on the other side of the sea always acted like they were superior. But did they have such a long bridge? No, none at all. Only Yanjiao had it. It was the only thing in the world. Didn't you see how many people are staring at it? They're still gathered at the bridge and won't leave. They say they want to walk on it. Duo Kang's smile almost reached his ears. Xiaoxian was also happy to hear this. Indeed, many people here would think of building a ship when they saw a river. Very few people would think of building a bridge directly. Plus, the flaming river was so wide that even fewer people would want to build a bridge. This time, it was a success. However, they couldn't be too happy just yet. How long could the bridge last? Whether it could withstand the flaming river's current would require time to prove. When they returned to the tribe from the forest, they also brought back news that the King's Stoneworm had returned to the mountain. This meant that the King Beast crisis was truly over. The Flaming River trading point was in a state of jubilation. The people who had been guarding the trading point all this time were hoping that the people on duty would come and trade with them soon. Only then would they be able to personally see the legendary bridge made by the king beast. A miracle. It really is a miracle. You see, stood in front of the stone bridge, carefully examining the miraculous bridge that had appeared here. Grasshopper's entire body was tense. The thorns on his back stood up. Even though the king beast had left, the bridge made by the king stoneworm still had the king beast's aura. It might not affect other people, but for Grasshopper, who had the bloodline of a fearsome beast, it was different. Just a little bit of the king beast's aura was enough to make him nervous. More and more people gathered around the stone bridge. It was only after Gigu sent people over to surround the area that they stopped their curiosity from going up the bridge. However, even if they couldn't go up the bridge, they could still see the Yin Jiao team coming and going on the stone bridge. They had a rough idea of what this bridge was like. There were many dangerous elements in the flaming river. This was something that the expedition team had personally experienced. There were countless fish that were more ferocious than wild beasts. This was also why the Yin Jiao people had always crossed the river by boat. The wooden rafts that Yin Jiao used when they first came back had already been put away. As the apocalyptic day passed, all kinds of ferocious fish in the river became more active. It was no longer suitable for them to walk on the wooden rafts. Standing on the rafts would make it difficult to fight against the river beasts that jumped out of the water. But now, the formation of such a wide and long bridge could solve many problems. This bridge was quickly given a name. Of course, it was named after the Crown River. Tall stone tablets were erected at both ends of the bridge. The tablets were carved with a Yin Jiao totem and the words Great Bridge of the Flaming River. The indentations on the tablets were painted with crimson-red paint. It was very eye-catching on the gray stone tablets. There were many people from other tribes who came to watch the Yin Jiao people place the tablets. Even though they couldn't get close, it still didn't dampen their spirits. Flaming River. Great Bridge? Someone read out the words on the tablet. Bridge? It fits the name of the bridge very well. It's really big. A bridge that could cross the flaming river. A bridge that could withstand the wriggling of a king beast. A bridge that didn't even budge when a Yin Jiao carried a huge stone tablet over. If it wasn't big, then who was? But some people thought that the word big must mean the size of the bridge. Maybe it was just a code name? Could there be a second or third bridge in the future? Someone asked in a low voice. The others didn't answer directly, but some people were thinking. As long as the king beast was still around, who could say for sure? Xiao Xian came to the bridge to take a look. At the same time, he asked the drumming tribe to help him take a look underwater. Even though he could use his senses to sense the situation underwater, with the help of the drumming tribe, he could see more details. Below the bridge, the part that was petrified was in the shape of an inverted triangle. The deepest part was more than 20 meters deep. There were no piers. If it weren't for the fact that the two sides of the bridge were connected to the shore, it could even be said that the bridge was floating on water. Was a bridge like this really sturdy? They could only wait and see. After investigating the stone bridge, Xiao Xian thought of the small river that was petrified by the king's stoneworm on the other side of the river. Even though the flow of that river wasn't fast, when the king's stoneworm petrified the water in that river, it directly cut off the flow of the river. After that, Xiao Xian brought the king's stoneworm back and cut off the flow of the river again. That was why there were now two bridges that cut off the flow of the river. There weren't many dangerous fish in that river. At most, there were some piranhas that lived near the flaming river. However, because the king's stoneworm petrified the water, there wouldn't be any fish that would come near for a while. Xiao Xian ordered people to set up a net at the upstream and downstream of the two stone bridges to prevent fish from coming near. After that, some Yin Jiao warriors and drumming tribesmen went into the water to dig holes in the two small bridges. They couldn't bear to touch the big bridge above the flaming river, but they were willing to work on the two small bridges above the river. Clang! The chisel only left a shallow dent on the bridge formed by the petrified water. It's so hard. Really? Let me try. Clang! It's true. This hardness is comparable to high-quality stone, right? Isn't this bridge made of water? Why is it so hard? You don't understand the strength of a king beast. Hurry up, let's dig a big hole here and use the stones to make stone tools. Yes, yes, yes. Hurry up. Curious about the quality of the stones, the people digging the holes in the bridge worked even faster. The chisels they used were made of new bronze, so it was easy to chisel. If they just wanted to clear the river, they didn't have to dig a hole. They could just dig another channel to go around the two bridges. However, the Yin-Jiao people wanted to study the stones, so they dug a bridge. It took some time to dig a hole. Halfway through, someone dug out a stone the size of a watermelon and weighed it in his hand. He said in surprise, "This stone is so light." Not far away, the travelers watching the Yin-Jiao people dig a hole snickered. Do you think we'll believe that? One of the Yin-Jiao people's lies. This stone is very light. Light my ass. Xiao Xian didn't stay there to watch them dig a hole. Duo Kong was guarding the bridge, so he didn't need to be there. Xiao Xian was called over by Ao to guard the 1,000-grain gold field at night. Since the king's stoneworm had left, they wouldn't meet the bat leader at night, right? However, when night fell, the bat still came. Xiao Xian stared at the bat leader that appeared again and remained silent. Why aren't you leaving? Your little brother is waiting for you to come back. Chapter 687. The king's stoneworm had left, but the problem was no less troublesome than the king's stoneworm. It remained in Yin-Jiao's fields. It did not destroy Yin-Jiao's things, nor did it come out to scare people. Every night, at a fixed time, it would appear silently and cut an ear of grain from the 1,000-grain gold's fields. It would then hang on the long and narrow leaf of the 1,000-grain gold, quietly watching the people guarding the fields. She didn't know how it managed to hang on to the leaf with its weight, but the leaf didn't even change the angle of its fall. What do we do? After the bat leader left, Ao wiped his forehead helplessly and asked Xiao Xian. Even after a few more times, he could not remain calm in front of the bat leader. Every time, he would be so nervous that he would break out in a cold sweat. Xiao Xian could feel the direction of the bat leader. When it stopped flying, although Xiao Xian could not determine where it was hiding, he could feel that it was not far from Yin-Jiao. It was not going back to the Bat Mountain in the depths of the forest. The days passed, and the 1,000-grain gold in the fields gradually matured. It was not as green anymore. Maybe it was because the weather was good, or because it was well taken care of after the fertilizer was improved, or maybe it was because it was used to the soil here. All in all, compared to when it was on the other side of the sea, the 1,000-grain gold was maturing earlier. Based on the current trend, the 1,000-grain gold would mature in about 10 days. Hearing Ao's question, Xiao Xian thought for a moment and said, "As long as it doesn't cause trouble for Yin-Jiao." You should have noticed that after it came here every day, there were fewer pests in the fields. In the fields, there were more grains that were about to mature at this time of the year. The more this time of year, the more insects there would be. Many strange flying insects would fly out of the forest, or insects that would come out of the ground to nibble on leaves or fruits. There were also insects that came from the forest after smelling the scent. The people guarding the fields had to get rid of many insects every day. The edible ones were all supplied to the trading point. The people at Yin-Jiao headquarters were tired of eating roasted insects. The green ducks also had a limited appetite, so they could not get rid of all the insects. As for those that couldn't be eaten, they would be kept as fertilizer. It was fine during the day, at least they could see and clean it up easily. However, it was much more troublesome at night. The local crops were about to ripen, and for those insects, the temptation of food was greater than their natural inclination towards light. The effect of the bug trap of the water moonstone was quite limited. But after the bat leader appeared, almost no flying insects appeared at night, and the field was quite quiet. This kind of phenomenon appeared in some of the fields not far from the 1,000-grain gold. It saved everyone a lot of work. No one could tell whether the appearance of the bat leader was a blessing or a curse. Of course, it didn't mean that bat leader was here to help Yin-Jiao get rid of the insects. Xiao Xian felt that it was waiting for the 1,000-grain gold to mature. Many animals didn't need anyone to teach them. They were born with the ability to sense things that were beneficial to them. Now, the bat leader was staring at the 1,000 grain gold because it felt that the 1,000 grain gold would be beneficial to it. In this special field in Yinjiao, other than the 1,000 grain gold, there were also some seeds from Jeju. Some of them were good grains, but bat leader didn't appear in those fields. It only stared at the 1,000 grain gold. "We'll see when the 1,000 grain gold ripens," said Xiao. Ao nodded. "That's all we can do. As long as the bat leader didn't cause too much trouble and didn't cause too much damage to the flaming horns, they could still afford a small portion of the 1,000 grain gold. Just treat it as a reward for the bat leader." After estimating the ripening time of the 1,000 grain gold, the tribe had already started planning for the harvest. When they were at the other side of the sea, the harvest of the 1,000 grain gold was very lively. Now, there were more 1,000 grain gold planted in the headquarters. The scale of the operation was also larger, so they had to plan carefully. Although the other fields weren't as crazy as the 1,000 grain gold, they still had to consider. Harvesting from the fields and the flaming river bridge kept Xiao so busy that he didn't have time to continue studying the monster in the secret underground room of the flaming river castle. After the King's Stoneworm's crisis was resolved, the flaming river trading point didn't calm down. Instead, it became even more lively. From the beginning to the end of the incident, it didn't take long. At the very least, it didn't involve the trading point for long. The teams that left in a hurry didn't go far at all. Some people just found a place to rest and wait for news after they left. No one expected that instead of the flaming river trading point being destroyed, they would receive news of a miracle on the water. At that time, the king beast suddenly charged out of the ground and turned the surrounding forest into stone. Many people died. They all turned into stone. At that time, the king beast went straight for the flaming river trading point. Yinjiao's chief was there too. He brought his people to meet the king beast. After that, he talked about how he witnessed the battle. The people who went to investigate came back and vividly described the situation at that time. The others in the group were stunned when they heard it, and then they began to shout. The person who told the story stood on a large rock with one hand holding a knife at his waist and the other pointing upwards. I heard Yinjiao's grand elder shout at the king beast, "Follow me," and then, "What happened?" The others asked expectantly, "What happened?" So the beast king left with him. The crowd immediately hissed in disbelief. That was a beast king. How could it follow someone so obediently? They didn't believe it anyway. The person standing on the rock looked around. Seeing that no one believed him, he became anxious. "If you don't believe me, go and take a look." Wherever the king beast went, it turned into stone. The forest outside, the flaming river trading point, is all turned into stone. There are traces on the ground too. Go and take a look. The path of petrification stretches from the forest to the flaming river, then crosses the flaming river and reaches the other side. Really? Someone's heart started to waver, but they couldn't imagine the situation. "Why would I lie to you? Let's go. I'll take you there." The king beast is gone anyway. It's no longer a threat. I'm guessing that this is all Yinjiao's scheme. It's all part of Yinjiao's plan. When the team returned to the flaming river trading point and saw the petrified forest and the traces on the ground, they couldn't help but believe it. Although the rumors were exaggerated, some things were true. Many travelers who left the trading point beat their chests and stomped their feet. Why didn't they insist on staying longer at the flaming river trading point? As a travel team, especially those with rich experience, they were curious about many things, especially those shocking things. But they missed it this time. But even if they missed the chance to see the king beast, seeing the traces left behind by the king beast would still make them feel better. Hence, no matter if it was the area the Flaming Horn tribe marked as their territory, or the long bridge that spanned across the flaming river, travelers all stopped to look at it. And those who left also brought the news to all parts of the mainland. Yinjiao became popular again. Not only was it popular, it was even more popular than the last time the Flaming River Trading Point was built. The names Yinjiao, Flaming River Trading Point, and Flaming River Bridge were spread everywhere. Now, in all the other trading points on the mainland, as long as there were travel teams, large or small trading points, or resting areas, there were people talking about the Flaming River Bridge that Yinjiao used the King Beast to build. There were many trading points in the Flaming River. Many people weren't interested in the Flaming River's trading point and didn't want to travel all the way to see it. However, the king beast had built a long stone bridge that spanned the entire river. This piqued many people's curiosity, and they formed groups to go to the Flaming River. Whether it was the suspicion of the Flaming Horn tribe's king beast or the curiosity of the king beast bridge, many teams were attracted to the Flaming River trading point. Whether it was to find out the truth or to see a miracle, more and more people gathered. Humans tended to follow the crowd. Even if people from smaller tribes were cautious about the king beast's visit, they would still want to join in the fun when there were so many people around. In the past, before the Flaming River trading point existed, they would spend most of their time inside their tribe or in the forest near their tribe. However, ever since they came to the Flaming River trading point, they fell in love with the lively chatter and excitement. Not to mention, they could even trade for things they wanted there. This was also why the Flaming River trading point was getting more and more lively. In the forest not far from the Flaming River trading point, 7 long-winged birds gathered together. There was a person sitting on each bird. At this moment, they were all looking at the gray stone bridge in front of them. Other than Wu He, the other 6 people were shocked. Too bad you didn't see what happened. What a pity. Wu He looked at his companions who had just arrived at the Flaming River trading point with a sorrowful expression. He almost said, "You're all Chong Lees for nothing." Someone's eyebrows twitched. They wanted to mock Wu He, but it was a pity that they couldn't witness the magnificent feat of building a bridge with their own eyes. That was one of the biggest regrets in life. It was rare for them to be interested in something like this. Let's not talk about that. Wu He, what are you planning to do? Another person was impatient with Wu He's smug expression and urged him. They had just arrived, so there were some things they didn't know. Wu He, who had arrived earlier than them, was probably the most familiar with this place. They needed to find something else to comfort themselves with. My target isn't the trading point. Let's go to Yin Jiao's headquarters. There should be a lot of good stuff in Yin Jiao's fields at this time. Wu He smiled and rubbed his hands together. His eyes were filled with anticipation. During this period of observation, Wu He noticed that while everyone was focused on the Flaming River trading point, the Flaming River Bridge, and Yin Jiao's new land, Yin Jiao's headquarters were doing something strange. With his observation skills, he could see that Yin Jiao's headquarters were planning something else. It had nothing to do with the trading point or the Flaming River Bridge. In the end, his conclusion after a few days of observation was that there was something good in Yin Jiao's fields. Something good. The others' eyes lit up. That was right. This was the season to start harvesting. Good, good, good. We finally have something to do. No matter if there was really something good there or not, they would still go and check it out personally. They didn't want to be idle anyway. Are we going now? Let's go take a look first. Wu He patted his long-winged bird and pointed in the direction of Yin Jiao's fields. Let's go. They didn't dare to go directly to Yin Jiao's headquarters, but they could still approach the fields from the side. Yin Jiao's fields were not small. Even if they were discovered by the Yin Jiao people, there wouldn't be many Yin Jiao people who could chase after them. But after he gave the order, he waited for a while. The long-winged bird under him didn't move. It remained in its original position. It wasn't just Wu He. The other 6 people's long-winged birds were the same. Let's go. Disobedient again? Wu He continued to urge them. He patted the long-winged bird. The long-winged bird made a coo sound and flew forward slowly. It flapped its wings half-heartedly, as if it was extremely unwilling. Its attitude was even worse than when they had approached the king beast. What's wrong? Someone asked. Coo. The long-winged bird beneath Wu He let out a cry. This caused Wu He to furrow his brows, and a few deep wrinkles appeared between his brows. There's something there that the long-winged bird is afraid of. Wu He looked at the direction they had planned to fly in. His expression was unusually serious. After the incident with the king beast, any abnormality would make him nervous. Even though they wanted to find something to play with, they still had to be cautious. Could it be that Yin Jiao's tamed eagle you mentioned before? Someone guessed. No, it's not that. Wu He shook his head. The long-winged bird is afraid of the eagle, but not to this extent. Wu He patted the long-winged bird's neck. Some feathers were already standing up. This was a sign that the long-winged bird was very nervous. He looked at the others. They were all the same. During your investigation, did you find out any other secrets of Yinjiao? Someone beside Wu He asked. Wu He pursed his lips. Yinjiao's headquarters are too heavily guarded. It's different from a trading point. I've only been here for a short time. How could I have found out so much? Could it be that King Beast? Someone else asked. Not likely. Wu He shook his head. After a moment of silence, someone laughed. Then we should go and take a look. As soon as this was said, everyone, including Wu He, laughed as well. The Chonglis were very curious. The more they didn't know something, the more curious they were. If they didn't find out, they wouldn't even be able to sleep peacefully. The long-winged bird's behavior didn't make them give up on their plan. Instead, it made them even more excited, especially the 6 people who came later. They thought to themselves, even if we didn't see the King Beast, maybe we'll find something interesting. It would be best if we could uncover some of Yinjiao's secrets and sell them to other tribes at a high price. They were very happy with this thought. Chapter 688. Xiao Xian didn't go to the Flaming River trading point, as it was the busiest time for the harvest. Instead, he stayed at Yinjiao's headquarters, eating and sleeping in the farmhouse. Xiao Xian knew about the spies in the sky. Yinjiao had never relaxed their aerial surveillance, but to Yinjiao, their aerial power was still too weak. Now, Yinjiao only had 2 birds that could monitor the sky. One was Gigu Snow Falcon, and the other was a Cha-Cha. Because the bat leader was nearby, Cha-Cha wasn't at the headquarters. Instead, it went to the trading point. As for the headquarters, the Snow Falcon stayed at the core area, which was the mountain where everyone lived. In Yinjiao's headquarters, other than those 2, there was also a flock of green ducks that could fly. Not to mention whether they would listen to orders and fight, just based on their fighting ability. They were already very fat from the insects in the fields. They were no longer as weak as when they first migrated here. Their movements weren't as nimble as before. They didn't have as many giant mountain eagles as the Hui tribe, nor did they have as many tame birds as the Feather tribe. Of course, they couldn't send their birds to attack suspicious people. Xiao Xian ordered the people on the watchtower to use their binoculars to monitor the spies. If they made any strange movements and flew directly towards Yinjiao, they would shoot them down with their bows. If their goal was open and above board, they could have used the Flaming River Bridge to come to Yinjiao's headquarters. However, they flew in so sneakily, it was obvious that they weren't good people. They were just like robbers. Within the Yinjiao tribe, there was a tense atmosphere. There was no joy from the harvest as expected. How is it? Xiao Xian asked Ao, who was sweating profusely as he ran over. It's almost done. The wanderers have already warned them to stay at home for the next 2 days. Chi-Chi and the rest who are taking care of the fields won't be coming over either. The area around the fields is under martial law. Ao took out the water bottle hanging on his waist and gulped down a few mouthfuls of water. After a busy morning, his throat was almost smoking. As the 1,000-grain gold ripened, the Flaming Horn tribesmen, who had set their sights on this plot of land, suddenly noticed that the crops in the other plots of land were also ripening these past 2 days. Those were all crop seeds brought back from the other side of the sea. It was also the first time they had planted them. They didn't know if there would be other unforeseen events if they didn't harvest them in time. This was because some crops had an optimal harvest time. After that time, the quality of the fruits would severely decline. Yinjiao still didn't have enough manpower. They needed people at the trading point, and they also needed people here. Especially when the peak harvest season was coming, they would be even busier. But this year's situation was special. They didn't dare to let those young warriors who weren't strong come over to the fields. Instead, they arranged for them to stay at the edge of the fields. They found another 200 people from the drumming tribe to help with the harvest. Although the people of the drumming tribe looked fierce, they were trustworthy. They wouldn't steal when they were busy. Many people in the drumming tribe didn't have much to do during the day. Since Yinjiao needed manpower and they were willing to pay, of course they were happy. But Xiao Xian also told them in advance that there would be certain risks during the harvest. They might encounter some difficulties and dangers, so they had to be prepared and not panic. The people of the drumming tribe weren't afraid of dangers. In the past, when they harvested water moonstones, they would also encounter dangers. That was why the drumming tribe's chief, Fan Mu, and the others didn't care. They felt that they could handle anything calmly. Of course, Yinjiao's main target was the 1,000-grain gold fields. That was what they valued the most. "Is it here yet?" Ao asked Xiao Xian in a low voice. The bat leader's matter wasn't made public. Ao only told the people guarding the 1,000-grain gold fields in private. Those who were sent here to guard the 1,000-grain gold fields were all trustworthy. They wouldn't say much. Xiao Xian knew who Ao was talking about. "It's here. It's already in Yinjiao's territory. It's in the mountains over there." Xiao Xian raised his hand and pointed. Ao looked over. Over there was a stone mountain where the warriors used to train. There were no plants, and it looked bare. However, there were some caves formed by natural erosion. The bat leader should be in one of the caves on the mountain over there. Now the warriors had many tasks every day. They didn't have time to practice hitting stones in the mountains. The smell of humans was almost gone. Sometimes they could see some birds building their nests there. Now, the bat leader was on the mountain over there. As the 1,000-grain gold ripened, the bat leader didn't go far. It stayed on a mountain and walked around the fields every night. No wonder I heard the patrolling people say there were fewer flying stone squirrels. It's because of this bat. Ao sighed. The bat leader really came. It wasn't just the flying stone squirrels. There were fewer beasts in Yinjiao's territory. Although there weren't many beasts in Yinjiao's territory, there were still a few mountains. There were many flying stone squirrels and other small beasts in the mountains where the wanderers lived. They would steal things from time to time and fight with the wanderers. But recently, there were fewer of them. Even if they weren't natural enemies, the pressure of a high-level beast would still affect them. Even the few beasts in the tribe were only on the mountain where they lived. They weren't close to the fields. The wanderers were told to stay at home for 2 days. They wondered if Yinjiao was guarding against them and preventing them from stealing grains. Some of them muttered unhappily. But soon, they found that it wasn't just the wanderers who lived in Yinjiao. Even the Yinjiao people who took care of the fields were taken away. Other than the murderous Yinjiao warriors, it was hard to see anyone else. I just saw Yinjiao's patrolling team pass by. They looked serious, as if they were preparing to go to war. A person who had just gone out to pee returned to the cave and discussed with the others. Something must have happened. Isn't it for the grains? An old man didn't understand. Definitely not. Which tribe would look like that when they're harvesting grains? They're all like rocks, the young man said. Thinking about it, the Yinjiao people were indeed too serious recently. They didn't even smile much. Could be a king beast. The woman who was tanning the animal skin was so scared that her hands trembled. No, it can't be right. At this moment, everyone was unsure. After all, this place was similar to the fearsome beast forest. It was even more dangerous. At least when they were in the fearsome beast forest, they didn't encounter a king beast. Besides, why couldn't there be another beast king after the first one had come? It shouldn't be. If it was, the Yinjiao people would definitely let the children in the tribe hide first. But as far as I know, the Yinjiao people didn't do that. They just put the farmland under martial law. A middle-aged man who looked quite steady said while tapping his fingers. As they were talking, they suddenly heard footsteps coming from outside. The people in the cave were instantly silent. "Heir 2, what's the hurry?" The middle-aged man who looked steady hurriedly got up and greeted him. The person who came was Heir. He had a good relationship with Jiao Wu and the others in Yinjiao. After the wanderers were settled here, 3 people were assigned to take care of them. Heir's position was the second, so now everyone called him Heir 2. Heir didn't waste any time talking nonsense. There was no trace of a smile on his face. He warned, "We just received news that the Flaming Horns asked us to listen for any movements. If we hear 2 hurried wooden whistles, we have to close the cave door." The middle-aged man handed a bowl of warm meat soup to Heir and asked in a low voice, "Heir 2, what happened? We don't feel safe. You know, the King Beast incident just passed." Heir didn't argue. He took the bowl and drank it in big gulps. He was tired of going from house to inform people. After drinking, his expression softened. He thought for a while and said, "I don't know what happened, but it's definitely not a king beast." As for the notice, just now, it was sent by the Grand Elder of Yinjiao, Xiao Xian. When they heard that it was Xiao Xian's order, everyone's expression changed. Who was Xiao Xian? He was the only Grand Elder in Yinjiao. His status was higher than the Yinjiao chief and shaman. He was the founder of the Flaming River Trading Point. Even a flaming river bridge was built by him. How could he lie? The people who were complaining at first didn't have any thoughts now. They just had to do as they were told. The Grand Elder was definitely right. All right, seal the windows too. Just leave some small holes for ventilation. Don't open the door no matter what you hear, unless you hear the whistle again. Hier reminded them again before leaving. Ah, okay, the middle-aged man quickly replied. After Hier left, he went to the next house to inform. There are many caves in the mountains and many tourists live there. He had to finish his job quickly. Although the people in the caves still didn't know what was going on, they still made preparations according to the notice. The Yinjiao tribe's mountain was also full of preparations. Old Ku even set up many traps in front of the house. I heard that many birds will come. Let's make sure they don't return. Caesar helped from the side, but he still looked in the direction of the bat leader from time to time. His eyes were full of vigilance. Very quickly, another 2 days passed. Early in the morning, Xiao Xian informed Ao and the others, "Get ready. The 1,000-grain gold will ripen today. It should be around noon." Suddenly, the atmosphere in the Yinjiao tribe became more solemn. Xiao Xian stood next to the 1,000-grain gold, looking at the golden plants. This time, the 1,000-grain gold plants were taller than the ones on the other side of the sea. There were more grains on each plant. The heavy grains swayed slightly in the wind, shining with a golden light. A wooden stick stood on the ground, its shadow getting shorter and shorter. In the distance, some birds flew over from the forest. As the 1,000-grain gold plants ripened, there were fewer insects. Many of their natural enemies had come. Some birds were omnivores. They ate grains and insects. They definitely didn't have anything to do with the insects. If there were only 2 or 3 birds, there was no need to panic. But what if there was a large flock? Xiao Xian whistled. 2 hurried whistles sounded. The people who heard the signal reacted immediately. The wanderers who had been told to stay in the house quietly heard the flapping of wings outside. Some people curiously looked out of the closed wooden door. Birds of all sizes were resting outside their door. From the sound of it, there were more birds around. Some people wanted to go out and catch one, but when they heard the whistle, they quickly blocked the door and closed the window. They looked out through the gap. More and more birds were landing. There were even birds fighting outside. In the sky, Wu He and the others looked down from the back of the long-winged bird. What's happening? What's happening? So many. Because they were flying high, they could see more clearly. In their field of vision, from the forest, flocks of birds were flying towards Yinjiao. To be exact, they were flying towards Yinjiao's farmland. Perhaps their target was the golden land that Yinjiao was guarding. The long-winged birds they enslaved were purely carnivorous, not vegetarian at all. They never ate grains, so they weren't very interested in the crops in the Flaming Horns fields. Perhaps they noticed something special about the crops in the Flaming Horns fields, but they weren't as crazy as the birds that flew here one after another. It must be something special, someone said excitedly. His eyes were burning. I heard that some Yinjiao people once appeared in the golden grain fields outside the royal city. Jiju of the golden grain fields gave them some gifts, Wu said. Wu had asked around and learned some things that surprised him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have set Yinjiao as his first target after crossing the sea. Hearing this, the other's eyes became even more heated. Could it be that the land below was planted with the seeds from Jiju of the golden grain fields? Maybe it's something that was secretly planted in the golden grain fields? Good. We didn't come here in vain. Chong Lu and the others couldn't help but rub their hands together. They couldn't wait to go over and sweep everything clean. What kind of place was the golden grain fields? It was the land of the famous Jiju. The grains that were produced there were important to the nobles of the royal city. The guards there were carefully selected. They weren't ordinary guards in the royal city. Among the fields outside the royal city, The golden grain fields were the most difficult to enter. If you tried to force your way in or sneak in, it was very likely that you wouldn't be able to leave. Not even a complete corpse would be left behind. Everything would be turned into fertilizer. But Yinjiao was different. It definitely wasn't as heavily guarded as the golden grain fields. Opportunity. Ha ha. I didn't expect such a harvest this time. Do you see those flocks of birds? Well, he pointed at the birds that were approaching the Yinjiao tribe. He said to the others, "Let's take advantage of the moment when those birds are causing trouble for Yinjiao. Do we need you to tell us that?" With those birds around, they could reduce their presence and take advantage of the opportunity to harvest more. However, unlike the Chonglis, the 7 long-winged birds were all nervous. When they looked at the flocks of birds flying towards Yinjiao, their eyes were filled with pity. Xiao Xian stared intently at the 1,000 grain fields in front of him. There were soldiers holding sickles and other harvesting tools at every corner of the fields. They were waiting for Xiao Xian to give the order to start harvesting. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.